Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 10 of Supremacy games. Let's dive into the video. Boycott. 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 Felix opened up his eyes at the sight of the spectators bellowing at the top of their voices, almost deafening his ears. It wasn't just him though, as the remaining 40 players throughout the entire maze all were shocked at such an unpleasant welcome. Who offended them to such a degree? Bewildered and a bit amused, Felix thought while looking around him, sizing up the remaining 40 players. Soon, he noticed a huge contrast between halves. 20 players or so were standing with a relieved expression like they just gained a second lease of life, while the other half had the same signs of defeat that appeared on every player after a lost game: disappointment, discontentment, frustration. Oh! Before he could look into it deeply, he spotted Hound Stench nodding at him in a polite manner. He didn't know where that came from and honestly wasn't interested in knowing right now. He just replied back with a nod of his own and continued watching the players, hoping that his GP farmer was still alive. However, instead of finding her, he saw Charming Sky blowing a kiss in his direction and Mastermania next to her, looking at him with bloodshot eyes. Those two losers are still alive? Meh. Disinterested, he bypassed them both with his eyes, not even staring at them for an additional second. His total disregard for their existence made Charming Sky upset and Mastermania infuriated. Yet, Felix didn't give a crap about losers like them, he simply carried on searching for his GP farmer. Unfortunately for him, that seemed like too much of a wish, as his eyes landed on Princess Bird, who was facing him with hands on her H.I.P.S and fangs baring at him. He didn't know how did he anger her, and based on her furious expression, he had a bad feeling that he would meet up with her later on. Honestly, he wasn't ready to deal with her infamous tantrums. Thus, he totally ignored her, acting like he didn't see her. Soon enough, he spotted Miss Figure standing behind 4 players and peeking at him with one eye. Hee, why are you hiding? He mused. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, before he could walk towards her to tease her for a bit, he heard the sound of wings flapping above his head. He lifted his chin with an annoyed expression and saw that Zoe was about to land near him. He quickly retreated, not wanting to eat dust just like last time. Let's see how far can you run from me. Zoe withdrew her wings and approached him in a swift manner. Felix didn't budge from his position, as he knew that no matter what she did or about to do, his right to remain silent could not be taken away from him by anyone. Just from the obsessed look she was giving him, he figured out easily that she was seeking answers on what happened during his fight with Solar Mist's party. However, no matter what she says, he would not let a single peep in his eyes, telling them that his revitalization passive was his ultimate ability was more than enough to stop them from thinking that he used 4 passives in the purification realm. As for the rest, he didn't give a shit about seething their curiosity. He would bounce the moment he receives what he was waiting for. Just as Zoe tried to speak, she closed her parted lips by herself after seeing that damned tag hovering above his head. You bastard, today you are not leaving until you satisfy me. She turned around, ignoring Felix, and put her microphone in front of a heavily wounded player, who had one missing arm and clothes all ripped up by claw marks. It seemed like he did not have it easy in the game. Delighted, the player's eyes brightened up after seeing that his chance to get a bit of spotlight was finally given to him. He suddenly felt that his wounds didn't hurt that much. Sadly, Zoe's question was entirely irrelevant to his experiences in the maze. Heck, it was irrelevant to his entire life. Do you know who the spectators were shouting boycott for? She pointed her finger behind her back, aiming at Felix, and said, "It's no one else but you." She turned around and stared at Felix's face, wanting to see his reaction. Was he scared? Worried? Or even a bit curious why they were shouting at him? Unfortunately, none of the above. He just had the same expressionless face as he always had during the interview segment. Like whatever was going around him had nothing to do with his existence. She clicked her tongue and turned yet again to the player, whose eyes were about to spew flames at her face. He neither hid his fury nor wanted to. Who could blame him though? He was literally being used as an outlet to interview Felix indirectly since she couldn't get an official interview with him. He was being watched by millions of spectators, serving as a loophole for her to take advantage of. Everyone knew of such a disrespectful loophole, and especially the players. Nothing screams louder with "I am a side character" #49611497512433979 for visiting. She knew that as long as she asked another player without mentioning Felix's game name, she wouldn't be muted like before. Thus, she continued talking without expecting Felix to respond. She just wanted him to hear her out. They were worried that you will ditch them and leave after clutching the championship and the bet at the same time. She smiled, but especially what happened exactly during your last fight. Your abilities truly began to baffle us. She frowned slightly and threw a barrage of questions. What was that black inducement exactly? Why you never used it on the beasts you fought before? How did you regain that much energy back? That's just impossible and also forbidden in the SG. YD. Enough, you are bleeding my ears. She suddenly stopped speaking after hearing Felix's voice so close to her. She turned around and saw him standing 1 meter behind her with the same indifferent expression. She was too engrossed in her throwing all of her questions that bothered her and the spectators to pay attention behind her. "Give me the mic," he said, gesturing with his hand. Uncaring about his cold tone, Zoe delightfully gave it to him and watched him silently putting it near his mouth. Felix waited until the spectators quietened down their ruckus. Then, he lifted his head and eyed the sea of people all peering at him with curious looks. He smiled and asked, "Was Zoe the one to incite your dissatisfaction about me?" "Yees. She did. Landlord, I love you. I am your fan for life." Not everyone answered his question, as the majority were screaming random stuff that was incomprehensible to Felix. Well, he literally asked millions of spectators all at once, plus they were quite excited about having him speak to them for the first time, especially after watching his gameplay inside the maze. Still, he got what he wanted to hear. He turned his head and said to Zoe with an easygoing smile, "I was planning to remain regardless, in order to accept the unique title that I just won. However now..." His smile was wiped out of his face as he said indifferently, "There is no point doing so anymore. Especially when everyone is so riled up." He threw the mic to the dumbfounded Zoe, who caught it reflexively. Then, he waved his hand to his loyal fans while his body was in the process of disintegration. He didn't hesitate for even a second to leave. Check out LTSTVL on novl/bin.cm. The moment Princess Bird and Mastermania saw him leave, they also followed after him unnoticed by the spectators and the players. One was too proud to remain and the other was rushing to start his bounty plan. Felix was not lying when he said that he planned on staying to accept the unique title award ceremony, since it was his first time ever that he won a title. But after understanding that Zoe went to such a length to get her answers, even stirring up the spectators to turn against him, he had no plans on amusing her wishes anymore. The title, the collected GP from the bet, and even Mississippi Figures points were all going to reach him by a simple request from the Queen. He didn't need Zoe to give him any of this. Those ceremonies were merely basic etiquette for the MCs to conclude their game on a good final note. That was all to it. Zoe literally just shot herself in the foot by provoking Felix like this. She completely forgot that he was a jerk, who gave 0f*ck to people's wishes and opinions. Threats and pressure never worked on people like him, they just make it worse. Alas, it was already too late for her to salvage her mistake. Felix was truly gone from the stadium, stunning the spectators in the middle of their cheers and the players, who still had no idea what were they talking about. But the one shocked the most was Zoe, as she didn't believe that he actually managed to reach 10K GP and obtain her unique title, the wealthiest of them all. #49655210599051748 for visiting. His rewards ain't going nowhere, so it was much better to take a break from such a stressful game. If he had to rate this game with all of the games he went through, it would honestly be in the top 10. 6 hours later. Felix opened his muddled eyes slowly in his bed. He scratched his head while looking around him with half-closed eyes. The room was dimly lighted, as the sun outside of his open window was nowhere to be seen. He looked at his AP bracelet and found that it was 5 a.m. Well, it was only natural, as the game started at 8 p.m. and lasted the entire duration. Thus, by the time he woke up, it was already morning. He yawned while standing up, planning to brush his teeth and take care of his bowels. It was hard to change long-ingrained habits, thus it was better to just add them in the UVR. After a while, he turned all of the house lights and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Honestly, it was more of a putting dishes on the table and choosing food from the VR menu, just like he was in a restaurant. Of course, since he was born and raised eating Earthling's food, he chose a scrambled egg, a glass of orange juice, toast, bacon, and finally pancakes. He was more comfortable eating this than other cultures' food. His tasting buds always had difficulty adjusting to their foreign taste. Though, he did eat a few meals here and there by them. "It smells good." Asna's delightful voice popped up in his mind. "I will make the same breakfast." She snapped her finger and a mist-made table full of dishes appeared before her bed. However, before she took a single bite, she heard Felix's calm voice, "Asna, thank you for the help in such a critical moment before." She flinched and replayed with shifty eyes, "Don't be stupid. If you died, I would die with you, so I was simply helping myself." That's true." Felix nodded his head faintly, "though, I believe if you told me a bit earlier about your energy, I wouldn't have exposed my fourth passive. But most importantly..." He suddenly slammed the side of his fist on the table and yelled, "Not get F***king blasted into 4 pieces." His anger was quite understandable, as Asna had ways to help him out yet always saying nope. He asked her 4 times during the game, and every time she was quick to shut him down. Even when we almost on the brink of death. Felix knew that he shouldn't be asking for help from her, since it was him fighting in the game, not her. But in his eyes, they were partners, and partners were supposed to help each other when in need. He wasn't ashamed to ask for help when he made a mistake, didn't understand something, or simply was having difficulty making a valid plan. His pride never stopped him from asking Asna once, twice, and even thrice. He wasn't mad nor upset that she answered with nope. However, when his life and also hers were endangered yet she still refused to chip in, that's where things start to be a problem, especially in such a tight-knitted relationship. For God's sake, they share the same soul, they might have 2 different consciousnesses but still, they exist in one soul. For her to only offer her assistance before he got blasted by the sun, he didn't understand if she was that sadistic to see him explode or simply she was hiding something from him that she didn't want him to find out. Nevertheless, he was not standing up until he finds out the true reason. "Please, enlighten me, where did you get that energy and why did you hide it from me for so long?" He closed his eyes and warned coldly, "Don't you dare lie to me." Gloomy, Asna kept fiddling with a fork in her hand while thinking deeply about her next move. She wanted to come clean to him, but she also knew that he wouldn't like her reason one bit. Their relationship was just getting better and she didn't want to ruin it due to a mistake she made in the earlier days of their rebirth. Thus, she simply kept her silence, not responding to his question. Felix waited and still, he heard nothing. Forget it. It seems like trust is too much to ask for nowadays. Disappointed, Felix sighed and started eating his breakfast. He didn't know her reason for silence, but it was obvious that she was worried about his reaction after hearing her response. This only meant that her energy stash wasn't for good purposes. As he assumed, Asna had an uneasy expression as she heard his thoughts. She was getting distressed that if she hid her reason it might do even more harm than good. If she came clean, their relationship might recover later on. However, if she kept her silence there was no way in hell Felix would keep trusting or relying on her. Promise me that you won't snap, and I will tell you everything. She suddenly murmured softly. Heh, is it that bad? Felix sighed. I can't make promises, but I will try my best. Good enough. She hugged her knees and told him with a soft voice, I got that energy from our daily affinity enhancement. I was providing only half of the purified energy and keeping the other half to myself. She paused. I did so because I was planning to forcefully take control over your body. As expected. Instead of getting mad, Felix merely chuckled. He knew that there was no other reason than this. Plus, with Asna's personality, he believed that she would try to pull something like this off at least once. Thus, he wasn't really that shocked or surprised. It is what it is. Please, carry on. He requested. Asna was a bit creeped out by his lackle.u.s.to reaction, but she still continued her explanation. However, I found out that the energy needed to pull this off was unattainable. She sighed. The hidden stash I tried hard to collect wasn't even enough to give me 2 seconds of control. Thus, I gave up on trying. This was when we still didn't really trust each other that well. When you visited me after your first game, that's when I stopped having any thoughts about gaining control of your body. She lifted her head and saw him still having a calm expression on his face as he continued to eat his breakfast, like what she was talking about had no relation to him whatsoever. After you started visiting me daily, I realized that it wasn't so bad living in your consciousness anymore. She smiled gently. We play cards, we watch movies, and most importantly we talk to each other. I was comfortable the way I was, and I didn't want anything to jeopardize that. She sighed. Thus, I decided to not inform you about the energy I took. I didn't want you to snap and ignore me. I am sorry. She hung her head low as she apologized with a faint tone. Cluck! Felix put down the fork on the empty plate while wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. He lifted the plates one above the other and put them in the sink. Then, he started cleaning them off with an easygoing smile on his face. He didn't respond to her explanation nor to her apology, he just kept cleaning them dishes off. Asna was getting a bit troubled by his silence. She wanted to read his thoughts and see what he was thinking about what she said, but she kept stopping herself from doing so. Even for her, that wasn't proper. After a while, Felix finished cleaning all the dishes. He dried his hands and closed his eyes, planning to enter his consciousness. He didn't know if she read his thoughts already or not, but he would still tell her his peace of mind face to face. Inside the mist-made mansion, Felix walked inside and saw Asna sitting on the bed with her head lay low on her knees. He ignored her and went to bring a chair. He put it near her bed and sat on it with one leg above the other. Asna, look at me, he said, smiling. Asna lifted her head and stared at his eyes with a guilty look. She felt like a criminal who pleaded guilty on trial and now waiting for the final verdict. Was it going to be merciful or not? Asna, do you know what made me mad about your entire story? He asked, not expecting an answer. He simply shook his head and said, it wasn't the fact that you took half of the energy without my knowledge, or even the fact you wanted to take over my body. He signed, it's your belief that I will throw some kind of tantrum after you tell me. Felix was neither lying nor saying so to make her feel better, he truly meant what he said. Maybe, someone else would have flipped at the idea of his partner wanting to control his body, but not Felix. The moment he realized that Asna was sealed in his consciousness, he knew that one day she would attempt to make a move at him. He just didn't know how and when. So, he wasn't really surprised when she came clean. This what made him upset, she not trusting him enough to come clean earlier. If she did and apologized sincerely, he would have let bygones be bygones and start preparing for ways to take advantage of her purified energy before the game even started. He wasn't that petty to hold it against her forever. She made a mistake, she came clean, and most of all she apologized. Those 3 steps were all he required to forgive her. However, after getting blasted by the sun and forced to show his 4th passive, which he never had plans of doing so, simply due to her indecisiveness, he couldn't let her go that easily. "I am sorry for not telling you earlier." She sulked, "If I knew you would be this chill about it, I would have done so months ago." "Chill?" He gave a dry laugh. Felix was only this relaxed was because he was saved due to her hidden energy. Its purpose might not have been good, but what mattered was that it did well eventually. In his eyes, it was pretty much illogical to throw tantrum about her energy, when the only reason he was alive now was due to it. "All right, hear how things are going to be between us from now on." His casual attitude was thrown out of the window as he pointed 2 fingers in her direction with a cold expression. "1. No more secrets between us. You can read my mind and my memories easily. So all of my secrets are open to you. I want you to do the same, at least with things related to me." "Okay, I promise." She sighed in relief after hearing the last part. It was clear she still had no plans to talk about her origin. Felix wouldn't rush her for it. She could take all of her time until she was ready to speak about her background. However, for secrets related to him, he wanted to have full transparency between them. 2. When I ask for your help, at least make some effort instead of saying nope in a heartbeat. Cough, I will try. Embarrassed, she coughed while avoiding eye contacting with him. Felix's eyelids twitched at this sight, as he knew that with her laziness, this second condition was even harder than the first one. Good, now since we're still at it, why don't you explain to me exactly how you were going to control my body? Curious, he asked with a hand resting under his chin. The method and knowledge I was going to use had relation to peak energies and techniques. I don't think your mind is ready to hear such a peak-level terms. She shook her head and said with good intention, you might actually lose the motivation to tread in your Gobrov human race bloodline path. Are you certain you still want to know? She asked, dead serious. Yes. Felix answered dead serious as well. Speechless, Asna kept staring at his solemn eyes, not knowing how to respond. She expected him to agree with her and ask her in 50 years later or something. Yet, his serious look made her certain that he wasn't leaving her alone until he gets his answer. Go away! I am not telling you. In the end, she just waved her hand, shooing him away forcefully. Felix's form disintegrated into the lake's mist, as he was thrown outside of his own consciousness without his approval. Slam! What the hell, Asna? Felix slammed his palm at the table as he shouted, what happened to the first condition we made? No more secrets related to me. Trust me, Felix, you are not ready yet. She turned on the TV while saying cutely, you are my only chance to gaining freedom, and I don't want to ruin your cultivation pace. Just keep doing what you do, and when the time comes, I will tell you everything about it. What kind of bullcrap is this? Felix was truly on the verge of flipping the table. No matter what you say or do, I will not budge. She suggested, ask me another thing unrelated to that question. Fine. You said that you were taking 50% of the purified energy. He reseated himself and asked in irritation, "Does that mean I could have reached 100% affinity with only 5K high-grade stones, instead of the original 10K you told me?" Cough, when you put it like that it does sound bad, but trust me, She suddenly froze, totally out of excuses to use. "You what?" He snickered sarcastically. I will make it up for you," she promised him softly. "No need, that energy was used by me eventually." He waved his hand dismissively and said with a pained expression, "Still, purified energy made of 5K high-grade stones could have been used more efficiently." "Why the hell did you give me all of it? I would have won the fight with just 30%. He asked, pretty annoyed. Up.dfrm no/v/e/lb/i n.co/m. You have no idea how long I wanted to get rid of that energy. She coughed, so the moment I made the decision to give it, I didn't want to leave a single particle with me. Why are you getting more and more useless? He scolded her while calculating the amount of asna wasted by her irresponsible energy toss. Stop spending all of your time on TV. It's clear, your low intelligence is getting even lower. Screw you. I am not the one who was C.O.C.KY to waste all of his energy on beasts just to get ambushed later on without a single way to retaliate. She flipped him the finger without pausing the episode she was watching. 175 million? Felix felt faint at the result, almost passing out cold. For Felix, who needed every coin in his bloodline path to waste 175 million in just 5 minutes was truly a bit hard for him to swallow. Although it was used to save his life, he still felt the sting of it. This was another reason he was upset at Asna. If she told him earlier, he could have avoided losing all of his purified energy in one fight. The sad part, he lost it as well in real life. Just because he was in the UVR, it didn't mean his real body's elemental energy wasn't being consumed. It was actually the opposite. Any ability that he used in the games, not the UVR, just the games, it would consume the same amount in real life. The SGA made it as such to keep the economy of energy stones balanced. After all, the majority of the Bloodliners pretty much used the Supremacy Games platform as a way to obtain resources and not go find them by themselves in the real universe. This meant the elemental stones needed to be spent in one way or another. Otherwise, a Bloodliner just needed to buy enough stones to refill his real body once and not bother with them anymore. The SGA of course didn't want that to happen. The elemental stones market was too big to simply give up on it. Thus, they added a clear rule within the SG contract that elemental energy used in the games would be spent in reality as well. The process was actually simple. The moment a Bloodliner activated ability, the amount needed for it to be active gets released from his body's pores automatically in a mild, undetected manner. Obviously, when this rule was added, it didn't please the players much. After all, the rule literally made them buy elemental stones just to be used during their stay in the VR pod. However, their complaint meant Jack's hit to the SGA. Anyone who didn't agree with their policy could give up on climbing the SG ladder and head to the real universe to get their resources. No one was forcing them to play. They could give up any time they wished. Even if they signed the contract. It didn't bind them to play every 2 months or so. Sure enough, the players were simply throwing fits. As for giving up on the platform, that wasn't happening anytime soon. How could they give up on it, when it had everything they desire? If they won, they get to wish for what they need. If they lost, they still get either paid based on the number of spectators who came for them or by game points they collected in the game. It was always a win for them. As for adventuring in the real universe, unless a clan forced the Bloodliners to do some mandatory missions as Felix did in his previous life, no one would actually leave. The universe's dangers were no joke. There were void creatures roaming around, pirates hunting for space.i.p.s, banished individuals seeking to vent, and many more dangers ready to jump on you. No bloodliner was sane enough to leave the SG platform and head outside for resources. If the UVR was the bright and sunny side of the universe, then the real universe was its dark and gloomy side. In conclusion, elemental energy could be used in the UVR as much as one wanted, either in training centers, measurement centers, and other platforms. However, in the case of the SG, it was dispensable. If a bloodliner lost all of it, he needed to use stones in the real world to recover it. This was the reason why Asna was able to pump purified energy into Felix's body. He was totally spent after he used all of his energy during the game. If it wasn't, his body would have exploded from the overflowing energy. Since they share the same soul, Asna pumping her own energy from the inside didn't trigger the Queen's detection. After all, there was a huge loophole left behind from the SGA decision, and that was the fact bloodliners could simply ask someone to put an elemental stone on their hand. The bloodliners could easily then absorb it by giving out the order to their body, even though they were in the UVR. The SGA couldn't do anything to stop them from absorbing energy, but they could make the act itself forbidden. With Queen's existence, it was quite easy to spot abusers of this loophole and punish them. Felix and Asna were totally under the Queen's radar. After a while, Felix stopped moping about what had been done and started focusing on the future. Asna, I will be bringing you stones from now on to purify them like usual. Felix smirked, I would be a fool to not use you as an emergency energy carrier. Incensed at the way he called her, she shouted with her mouth full of popcorn. Totally unbothered by her yell, Felix merely requested from the Queen to show him all of his earnings from the game. He finally dealt with Asna, and now it was time to see if his plan of turning the game into a wager chase was worth it or not. As you wish, Sir Felix. As expected, the Queen easily fulfilled his request. There was absolutely no need for Zoe to give him anything. // Winning wish. Unique title, the wealthiest of them all. Streaming revenue, 360 million SC. Serial code for Malin chicken fish leg. Game points collected solo, 10,000. Game points by Miss Figure, 1100. Total game points collected, 26700, // Hee hee, everyone worked hard, I see. Good lads, good lads. Gleeful, a wide grin immediately affixed on Felix's lips as he gazed at the total GP he earned from the entire game. A whopping 26k GP from one game. An unfathomable amount he didn't manage to collect in his previous life, even though he played tens upon tens of games. Well, if the points he spent were counted, he would have reached and far surpassed this amount, but still, it would never be the same as getting those points in a single game. Nonetheless, a silver game. Finally, I have what it takes to join the Ivy League. He smirked while closing off the hologram. Till this point, he still didn't glance at the title or bothered to care about it. The unique titles had only one use, and that was bragging. Thus, there was no need to feel too excited about it. At the end of the day, it was just a title. Felix had other important stuff to think about right now than how the title would look above his head. Applying for the SG Ivy League was the current thought that was coursing through his mind. In his previous life, he was always seeking a way to enter the SG Ivy League. One of the best leagues or clubs created by a group of high-ranked players, exceeding the gold rank. The league's existence was built on 4 pillars. 1. Gathering spot of the best players. 2. Prize pool free trading. 3. High-stack private battles, and lastly 4. Absolute freedom. The Ivy League was completely private and closed off from the public. Only worthy players could be accepted within the league. Obviously, just like the majority of players, Felix applied to join the trials every year. Yet he failed all of his trial attempts. You see, to join the Ivy League there were only 3 ways to do so. 1. Apply for the trials after reaching the basic rank accepted, which was being in gold rank. 2. Automatically join the league if you had an above gold rank or have 20k game points collected. Felix, who was stuck in gold rank in his previous life, was only able to try and join by applying to the trials like everyone else. If it was easy to gather 20k GP, he would have done so and joined straightway. Sadly, for Felix, who never managed to gather 8k points before getting forced to spend them on resources, 20k was but a pipe dream. Right now, Felix was planning to head to the Ivy League's private city after fulfilling the 3rd requirement. Felix had no plans to join clans because they were pretty much useless to his bloodline path, and they were limiting his freedom. However, the same couldn't be said for the Ivy League. It was the perfect unofficial organization for him to join. He would be able to meet with high-ranked players and socialize with them or battle with the peers in the same rank as him with a high stacks bet on. Yet, his real motive for joining the league was to hasten the elemental potion material collection. The majority of the elemental potion materials were on the gold rank prize pool or above. None of them were accessible in bronze or silver. This meant if Felix wanted to gather those materials he had to reach gold rank first, and to do so he needed to win another 3 games. In other words, he would be delayed for 6 months. This was only if he was extremely lucky and managed to get all those materials in the first gold game prize pool. If he was unlucky, his prize pool might not have any of them. After all, there was an incalculable number of resources and the SGA wasn't going to put them all in every game prize pool. It didn't work like that. The SGA put in each game a random combination of 100 items in limited stock, except for the common materials like energy stones. This signified that it all depended on luck if Felix could land those materials or not. In other words, extra months would be added, making him delay reaching the first stage of replacement by a year or so. This was just the first hurdle. Don't forget the price of those materials, as Felix would need a huge amount of game points in order to buy them. Felix understood that it was impossible to collect 26k GP or so even if he played 10 games, which were similar to the death race. Even if he wanted to avoid relying on the SG to collect those materials and choose to do so in auctions, how exactly was he going to get invited or get a recommendation letter again? He could forget about Mr. Gawadi, as blackmailing him for one was already pushing it. This meant Felix lacked the means to even attend those auctions, where he would definitely get ripped off even if he got in one. One should never forget about the last auction he was on. He was almost robbed of his entire capital just to get 2 materials that he could have gotten from the Ivy League way cheaper than ever. This meant relying on auctions to collect materials was never a good solution. The only solutions he had were either get chummy with the high echelons of the Empire, which was quite far-fetched with Felix's current state, or just join the Ivy League. In that sense, Felix should thank his lucky stars that he landed on the shuffle maze that had a farming format, and players proud of their strength to join the wager that he proposed. They just gave him a heavenly sent shortcut to collect all the materials in one sweep. Felix made his plans with knowledge of all of this. As of now, he had the means to join one of the best unofficial organizations in the Empire, and also enough game points to buy all of the materials in the league's market. Truly hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. Queen, can you check for me please, when the next Ivy League gathering will be? He requested. Based on their website, the next gathering will be held tomorrow and last for 3 days. She answered in heartbeat. All right, thank you. Felix rested his chin on his hand while walking towards the living room. Just as he was about to take a seat, the Queen informed him, "Sir Felix, your email inbox is about to have 1,000 emails. Should I delete some?" "The hell?" he exclaimed out loud, startled by the massive number. Felix knew that he would be receiving quite a lot of emails after the game, thus he requested the Queen before sleeping to not inform him about them. Yet, he didn't expect the number to exceed 1K. Find up Tedovals on n/v/elben.co/m. Who sent them? He asked. Sir, you have 890 emails from different media platforms looking for interviews, TV shows invitations, idol agencies wanting to sign with you, popular streams invitation, and companies wanting to sponsor you. 119 emails are clans' invitations to join their ranks, and famous players inviting you to their cliques and groups. She informed him. My Felix is getting popular. Don't forget about me when you start swimming in girls. Asna cheered sarcastically. Unbothered by Asna's remark, Felix simply kept staring at his email inbox that kept getting refreshed every 5 new emails arrived. Before long, another 50 emails were added to his inbox. He picked one of them randomly and read it with his eyes. 50 million for a 10 minutes interview? He mumbled under his breath. The hell is going on for them to offer that much to interview me? Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #4969934242617606623 for visiting. He quickly swiped the email to the left and clicked on another randomly. This one was totally unrelated to the media, as it was a formal friend request from a popular idol player. Annoyed, Felix quickly deleted the email. He knew that the F***er was simply trying to use his popularity to enhance his own fanbase. After all, idols meeting up, taking pictures and videos was always good for their popularity. Popularity? Did I get famous to the point of being asked by idols? Bewildered, he tapped his name on the network search bar. Whoosh! Immediately after seeing the results, his eyes bulged out of their sockets, not daring to believe what his eyes were feeding him. This is madness. King madness. Millions upon millions of search results all having his name, pictures, the shuffle maze he was playing in, videos of his battles, requests to join his club, people asking for his VR social media account, and many more interesting results. The more he scrolled down, the bigger his grin got. He didn't believe that he would actually go viral in the UVR from his second game only. Although he went viral only in the Mariana Empire, it was more than enough for Felix, who never actually went viral even in the Alexandar Kingdom. But now, the entire empire was talking about him. Who could blame them? Felix's run on the shuffle maze should have made him at least get nominated as an MVP of the month. He slew 3 beasts, 2 epics, and 1 legendary. His total kill tally was 8 and 3 of them were hardcore players. All of this was done solo without anyone's assistance. Sadly, Zoe was his MC. Somewhat eager, Felix clicked on a video and was transferred into the website called VRVideos #49728875730626315 for visiting. Attracting hate was the true indicator of one going insanely famous. Thus, Felix wasn't annoyed by those comments. He simply ignored them and swiped the video to the left, wanting to see another one. This time he didn't choose a fight against beasts but sought to see the viewer's reaction to his battle versus Solar Mist's party. He kept scrolling down tens upon tens of his videos all about his battles and struggles in the maze. Some were about his fight with the Iron Titan, Terror Serpent, Lazy Rat, Charming Sky, and even Mastermania, while some videos were about him dodging the traps, entering the hidden compartment, showcasing fireworks, drama with Zoe, and such. Everything that had any relation to Felix was split into parts and uploaded on the website. My fans are truly working their ass off. He smiled. I should probably reward them later on. Felix didn't even need to guess to know that his club were the ones responsible for editing those videos and uploading them so fast. All of those videos took a good effort to be this well made. No one had that much free time to help Felix increase his popularity besides his loyal fans. Soon enough, Felix found what he was looking for. It was a video that was 15 minutes long and tilted landlord risen from the dead, Supremacy Games news cough. A bit embarrassed, he coughed and clicked on the title, wanting to see if he really was the one who caused her to get demoted. After reading for a while and watching videos of what happened during the stadium, Felix knew without a doubt that he had absolutely no relation to Zoe's demotion. The fact that he left the game without attending any ceremony, or even the fact he turned the spectators against Zoe before leaving, both of them were simply some of the fuses Zoe's rivals needed to take away her promotion to mid-ELO. It had nothing to do with Felix. The SGA wouldn't demote Zoe simply due to one player. However, the same couldn't be said when a couple of MCs made sure that all of Zoe's in-game flaws were highlighted to the public, creating an outrage. She made a lot of flaws inside the game. Even the fact she threatened that wounded player to not ruin her promotion was made public by the player himself and was included in the article. Felix shook his head and stopped reading midway after knowing exactly how his name got in the tongue of the commoners. In their journey to bring down Zoe, the MCs had to spot as much light as possible on Felix, the main character of the game, who in their own words inside the article, was treated unjustly by Zoe after everything that he had done inside the game. This made people try to figure who was Felix and what exactly had he done in the game to be spoken this highly by many known low ELO MCs. After they watched the replay, they couldn't help but marvel at his bloodline, anonymous character, his fighting style, and especially the way he always battles solo. He was unique from the rest. They saw it and they loved it. This made them share their favorite parts of his battles in their media feed. Some shared his fight with the legendary Beast, while some shared his battle with Solar Mist's party. What mattered was that Felix kept getting more and more attention until an SGN editor published an article written about Felix and his achievements. This article reached the top 20 in the trending list, and still climbing fiercely. Just like a snowball, the more attention Felix got, the more people started to see how Zoe treated Felix at the very end of the game. This was exactly what those MCs wanted, for Zoe's flaws inside the game to attract the public eyes, which in turn would attract the SGA's attention. The moment that happened, those little flaws she made would be turned into deadly swords, sharp enough to cut Zoe's career into a half. All of this juicy drama happened only in the 6 hours that Felix slept. A known MC had fallen from grace to damnation in only 6 hours. Rest in peace, Madame Zoe. Felix sighed, feeling a bit bad for Zoe's fate. Especially after he saw that she actually made him the focal point of the game since the start. But it is what it is. Felix knew that the MCs weren't doing this out of spite or hate, but simply to remove another competitor from getting a promotion to mid-ELO. The MCs, like the players, also had their own competition ongoing between them. Fighting for promotion was one of the many targets they had a rivalry for. Titus, Marlion, and Zoe were called all low ELO MCs, responsible for commentating and judging bronze, silver, and gold games. They could never commentate on games at a higher rank than gold, unless they got promoted to mid-ELO. However, that wasn't easy. Promotion spots were limited, and there were millions of them competing for those spots. Zoe was one of the MCs who had been in a promotion spot for a while now. She only needed one final push to reach the middle ELO. Felix's game was the one that was supposed to give her that push. Too bad, she made too many mistakes that ACCU.mulat into getting bailed out by everyone. Her prank in the first shuffle made the players look badly at her. The fact she didn't announce that Felix got the unique title after he reached 10k GP. Most importantly, she tried to turn the spectators against Felix the champion. A foolish move she shouldn't have done. To top it off, threatening the wounded player. All of those mistakes were used properly by her rivals to destroy her chances of getting that promotion. Now, she could only weep while commentating only on bronze games with MC still in an internship. Who knows when she would climb back to her promotion spot? Maybe it would take 50 games and maybe 100. The only thing that Felix knew was that Zoe's MC career was doomed. Find updates on n/v/elbin.co/m. Queen, please filter those emails. Show me only ones that were sent from high-ranked players and top idol agencies. After seeing how he got viral, Felix closed off all of the holograms, leaving only his email inbox that was about to surpass 1,200 email by now. The Queen quickly split the inbox into two parts. The emails, which she deemed important, were put at the top. As for the rest, they were left at the bottom. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #sthreat_49747135515655882 for visiting. Satisfied, Felix thanked the Queen and clicked on the first one on the list. He wasn't stupid to delete everything before reading at least 5 or 10. Who knows, he might find something of value in them. After reading the first email for a while, he closed it off and deleted it. It was an invitation to a party hosted by a high-ranked player over getting promoted to mid-ELO. Felix wasn't interested in those kinds of parties, as he knew they were simply hosted to kiss ass and bootlick the player who made it safely to the other side. He attended more than enough in his previous life to understand that bootlicking those players brought zero benefits. Next, he clicked on the second email and found out that it was half-an-hour interview on a famous TV night show. He deleted it as well and moved on. He had no plans to be interviewed, especially when the majority of their questions would be about his bloodline. Next. Unrejectable recruitment? A bit surprised by the title, Felix raised his eyebrows while clicking on it, wanting to see which agency was daring enough to send such an impolite email. // Dear Mr. Landlord. It has come to our attention that you have ruined the face of one of our favorite idols, Mastermania. In other words, you ruined his market value. We don't know if you are not familiar with the unwritten rules of the SG or not, but destroying idols' faces instead of killing them is a taboo move every player tries to avoid. Now, we do understand that you are still a newbie to the SG, and the majority of the unofficial rules are probably foreign to you. Thus, we came to a decision to let bygones be bygones under one condition. Join the BHE agency and sign an exclusive contract with us. We are one of the best agencies in the Mariana Empire. Hundreds of players from all ranks are being managed by our agents. We can make you reach the peak of popularity, whether you won the games or lost. We hope you understand that rejecting our recruitment will not bode well for you. Do consider deeply before sending your answer. Yours sincerely. Big Hit Entertainment, // Ha 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 ha. Instead of feeling the subtle threat that was on the email, Felix only felt like he just read one of the best jokes in both his lives. Read latest chapters at bin/o/m only. Unofficial rules? Taboo? Just thinking about them sent him rolling on the couch, laughing his ass off. Cough, cough. Holy shit! I am dying. He covered his mouth while coughing and laughing at the same time. At this moment, Felix wanted nothing more than to know if the one who wrote the email did it with a straight face or not. Weren't they afraid that he would publish their email for all to see, making them the butt joke of the year? Felix knew that the F***ers wanted to scare him by using his lack of knowledge against him. In their eyes, Felix was merely a newbie on his second game. For players like those, they could easily get scammed by an agency if they weren't paying attention or too stupid to just search the facts by themselves. Unofficial rules? Heh, Felix knew that the SG actually had those kinds of rules, but not damaging the face of an idol wasn't in them. Who the F***ck think they are to say that all of the players were trying to avoid ruining their idols' faces? The players never gave a shit about those losers and the agencies behind them. Good players all had their own private agencies responsible for managing their business. That's all to it, managing their daily life and business opportunities. The player was still the one making decisions. However, the same couldn't be said about those public agencies. They were sharks who elude as many players as possible with fame and fortune. They train them on how to be an idol and throw them in the games every 2 months. Even after the game end and they survive it somehow, they get paraded in the UVR. Doing interviews, fans meeting ups, show and streams appearance, wearing constantly sponsored outfits, and more of such never-ending publicly. They try to milk everything of the player until he finally dies inside the game. By that time, they would have already earned hundreds of millions. That's just from one idol. Now imagine the same happening to hundreds of idols inside that agency. Imagine the number of coins they make yearly from this business. They were literally losing money only if a player turned to be a failed idol. As for other instances, they always get more than what they paid for. Go. F***ck. Your selves. Felix immediately typed this reply, word by word, and sent it to them, not giving a shit about their so-called threat. He pretty much guessed that Mastermania tried to force them into putting a bounty on his head after what he had done to him. He saw it happen too many times in his previous life, it became the norm. However, instead of doing what Mastermania wanted, the agency first tried to recruit him. After all, Felix was currently one of the hottest topics in the empire. The amount of value he had was unfathomable, and they would be fools not to take advantage of him. Too bad, Felix wasn't a newborn baby, who had no idea about their thoughts and plans. I hope the bounty is large enough to force some fools into hunting me down, Felix said, chuckling. He wanted them to put a bounty on him and hoped that it would be big enough to move the majority of the players in his upcoming games. Why would he refuse such a free AoE taunt? Felix was confident in his own strength to brutalize any player that approaches him with ill intention. The only reason Solar Mist's party put him in a rough spot was that he wasted all of his energy on the beasts. However, he learned his lesson and he would never repeat that mistake again. Felix waved his hand to the left, swiping all of the holograms away from his face, except for the earning list that the Queen made. The agency's email made him lose his enthusiasm for reading more. He looked at his winning wish while scratching his chin, wondering whether it was worth to use it now or save it until he joined the Ivy League. Having a wish was the same as having a Walmart coupon card that lets you pick anything you want from the store. Better leave it for later, he said, deciding to not use it for now. Felix wasn't in a rush to waste it on purity drops or other materials that could be found in the Ivy League. He wanted to use it after he finished buying the materials in the league. After all, he might actually reach a dead end on a material. He didn't worry that his wish would expire or such. He could use it any time he wanted, even years from now. However, the wish would always have a limit. Since Felix got it in Silver Game, it meant his wish would also be limited to that rank. It was a known fact that Silver rank wishes couldn't go above 1 billion SC worth. This limit increases based on the rank a player was on. The higher his rank, the more leeway he would have in his wish selection. One could also ask to receive that 1 billion SC at once. Queen, please contact Mr. Gowadi, Felix requested politely while pressing on his profile interface, wanting to check his current status after the game. // rank, peak tier bronze, play 2 more placement games to get your final rank. Games played, 002. Wins, 002. Loss, 000. Win streak, 002. Loss streak, 000. Eliminations, 0014 //. After a quick glance, he closed it off and refocused on his call with Mr. Gowadi. Peep, peep. Unfortunately, he waited and waited, yet still, no one picked up his call. A bit annoyed, he called him again. The bracelet kept ringing on and on until the call made the peeping sound again. Felix this time didn't call him any further as he had guessed that Mr. Gowadi was probably still asleep. After all, it wasn't even 6 a.m. yet. Never mind, I will call that creep later, he said, deciding to let Mr. Gowadi enjoy his sleep for now. Felix had no plans of continuously calling him until he wakes him up forcefully. Even for Felix, that was a bit excessive. Waking someone from a good sleep just to ask for something was beyond a D.I.C.Kish move. Bastard, you didn't mind ruining my sleep up at that time to awaken. Asna cursed him after remembering the way he treated her on the day of the awakening. It's different with you. How so? You don't deserve to be treated nicely. You prick. I dare you to come and say it in my face. I would rather not. Felix ignored the following barrage of curses and requested the queen to log him out. He planned to do a quick checkup on the island in the next 2 hours or so before calling Mr. Gowadi again. Plus, he needed to fill his elemental energy tank after using everything in the maze. TSHSSHSH. White smoke came out of the VR pod as it was being opened up automatically. Felix pulled himself outside, wearing only his underwear. He already removed the needle that was attached to his arm, pumping that blue nutrition into his bloodstream. Good thing he bought one of the best products, as even though he continued lying on the pod for a week or so, he neither felt stiff nor tense one bit. He just stretched for a few seconds, cracking some of his joints akin to waking up from 8 hours of sleep. Then, he went to the closet and wore a cozy jacket, sweatpants, and sandals. Of course, he didn't forget about sunglasses. Although, it was still 6 a.m. or so, there were still some workers preparing to start their morning shift. Felix didn't want to distract them from their work by exposing his mutations in public. Awakened humans were hard to spot even in the mainland, don't even mention in the small island. Oh, good morning, James. Felix immediately greeted James after finding him standing guard near his suite door. Good morning, young master. I will be back in 2 hours or so. James nodded his head at Felix's retreating back, who was heading towards the elevator. 2 hours later. Whoosh, bam! The sound of waves colliding against a cliff resounded up the hill, where Felix was standing at the very tip of the cliff. He already checked the condition of the hotel, or at least what was checkable at this point. It turned out, the entire hotel was already in the middle of remodeling, except for Felix's floor. However, there was nothing much for Felix to evaluate and judge, as based on what he saw, the workers were currently trying to empty the rooms of all the useless furniture. They were not broken or in bad shape, but simply not luxurious enough for the hotel. Felix wanted the hotel to be a 6 stars, thus everything needs to be replaced. That being said, those furniture were not being thrown away or burnt, but actually were sent to the residential area, putting them in some lucky apartments. Obviously replacing everything required more money, but Abigail had nothing to worry about, as Felix was trading his coins for dollars and sending them to Layla. Trading coins with other currencies wasn't really that hard, as Felix could simply either request the queen to buy dollars from the offers posted in the currency trading platform, or just do it by himself. The CTP was open for any planet seeking to buy coins using their currency. They just needed to put an offer based on their currency's worth in the UVR and the interested parties would buy what they want. Since Earthlings joined the SGA for only a year or so, their currency wasn't really that valuable in the UVR. This made the dollar, euro, dirham, and all of those posted currencies in the platform to be completely shunned and ignored. When Felix tried to trade coins to give Layla enough capital in order to change the hospital equipment, he had a difficult time finding his family's offers on the platform. Although the platform had a search bar, Felix didn't know exactly the name of his family's offer. He tried Maxwell and it didn't work, as thousands of results greeted him: find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #49770060172018199 for visiting. Thus, he stopped bothering with doing it by himself and just started requesting the Queen to buy specifically from his family. Since the Earthlings' currency's value were dog shit in the UVR, not reaching even 1 SC equals $50 on average, Felix didn't really waste that many coins, as he traded only 1 million SC from time to time. This gave him $50 million for each trade, an amount good enough for Layla to handle any situation. The good part about this was that Felix's trading helped his family immensely. The elders had no idea that Felix was the one giving them free coins to continue helping the juniors and also enough capital to invest in the UVR. Nonetheless, they were grateful to whoever took pity on them. The elders weren't stupid to not realize that someone was directly helping them out. After all, in the CTP, there were millions upon millions of offers just from planet Earth. This meant that the prices varied significantly from each other. Some retards, who were desperate to get coins by any means, literally accept 1 SC for $100. Yet, Felix totally ignored them and traded only with his family offers. In his eyes, if he was going to give his coins to someone, it was better to give it to his family. At least Olivia and his grandfather would benefit from them. Upted chapters nnvelben.com. This what made the elders believe that some individual was watching them and assisting them. They didn't know what he wanted from them, and they honestly were enjoying his unconditional assistance to care about finding out. Sir Felix, the trade had been completed successfully. The Queen informed him, $100 million has been added to your bank account. She asked, should I send it all to Layla's bank account? Please. Felix nodded his head and turned around, planning to head back to the hotel. He wanted to give it to Layla directly, but she was still asleep. Today was her day off, and Felix didn't want to ruin her rest. There were plenty of chances to meet up with her later on. 20 minutes later, Felix got fully nude again and set foot inside the VR pod. He already filled his energy tank by using some of the 1K mid-grade stones he got from Fuzzia shop. He left them inside his spatial card just for this purpose. After he got himself comfortable, he requested the Queen to log him in. Queen, contact Mr. Gowadi please. The moment Felix opened up his eyes, he voiced his request again. This time, he wasn't going to stop until Mr. Gowadi picked up his call. Fortunately, he didn't need to go that far, as the call connected in the first 5 seconds. What do you want? Mr. Gowadi asked with an unpleasant tone. Clearly, still harboring grudges against Felix. Well, he was forced to delete his most prized gallery and also stop carrying out his hobby. It might be creepy and wrong, but it was still a hobby. How many epic tier 5 bloodlines did you gather for me? Unbothered by his tone, Felix straightforward laid down his question. I managed to secure 5 from my hunters. Mr. Gowadi warned, you better get them out of my store, I wasted a huge sum to buy them. Hee, brother Gowadi, I am a bit short on coins currently, I have only enough to get 1 bottle. Felix gave a forced laugh while promising, but don't worry, in 3 months or so, I will have enough to pay you for all of them. Please email me the serial number of the bottles with a time limit contract. Bye. Before Mr. Gowadi could even argue, Felix swiftly hanged up and turned off his AP bracelet phone feature for now. He didn't want to hear Gowadi barrage him with insults and curses. He knew that Gowadi would eventually accept this messed up situation and email him a contract that had a vicious requirement if he didn't manage to pay up in time. So, Felix was confident that in 5 minutes or so, he would receive the email. Just as he expected, the Queen informed him that the newest email was sent by Gowadi. Felix quickly opened it and read its content with his eyes. A satisfied smile broke on his lips as he saw that Gowadi truly got him 5 epic tier 5 bottles. He believed that at least one of them or two would have the required 9% that he needed to reach greater purity. However, his smile stiffened immediately after reading that if he failed to pay in exactly 3 months, their previous contract would turn void. Felix neither wanted to lose the 30% discount nor the free customs pass. Though, he wasn't really that worried about getting the coins, as he could resell the bottles to Luby, losing only 5% in each bottle. This would lower the amount needed to the bare minimum. Felix closed the email after registering the serial codes of the bottles. Then, he requested the Queen to send them together with Malin Fish Leg's serial code to Fatty Worm in order to deliver them as fast as possible. Felix wanted to reach greater purity before attending the World Representative battle. His landlord persona was gaining more and more attraction in both the UVR and real life, and since Felix was using the same bloodline with the same inducements, a solid relation between him and his landlord persona was going to be established. Felix didn't want that to happen. Otherwise, any player from a major background like Princess Bird could easily find him using their massive network. No one could save him from their aggression. Just sending one random stage 3 bloodliner and Felix would be completely hopeless. The only way to get himself away from such a situation was by unlocking 2 more abilities and using them with his real character. Landlord was currently famous for having 3 actives: Poison Bombs, Poisonous Aura, and finally the Fake Poison Revitalization. As for his passives, he showed that he had Poison Immunity, Super Strength, and lastly Ultra Infrared Vision. On the other hand, in the real life, he only showed that he had Poison Bombs and Poison Immunity to his family. This meant, the moment he displayed 2 different abilities from Landlord, no one would question him or get suspicious of him. If he reached 75% of integration and unlocked other new passives, he would be completely off the radar. They would never assume that he had 12 abilities, but he was simply using a different bloodline that was a bit similar. After all, there were few legendary bloodlines that had abilities able to switch endowments just like his. Felix was taking those great measures because he knew that some of the players were connected one way or another to a background. Either a clan, high-staged bloodliner, belonging to an ancient family like Princess Bird, and more. He had no plans of avoiding killing those players if they offended him or harbored any ill intention towards him inside the games. This signified that he was going to offend a hefty amount of parties, who would try their best to locate him in real life. However, as long as Felix split his 12 abilities apart, they would always end up targeting anyone except him. Tomorrow morning, Felix stepped out of his car and walked towards the teleportation company, planning to head to the Ivy League's private city. Since it was private, not anyone could just teleport straight to it. Though, Felix knew exactly what to do in order to get there. This time, instead of entering the base floor teleportation circles, Felix took the elevator and went for the 5th. After exiting the elevator, he saw that the floor was pretty empty when compared to the rage going downstairs. "Good morning, may I help you?" The receptionist, who was sitting right next to the elevator, immediately greeted Felix with a smile. "I want to teleport to the Ivy League city," he answered. "Are you willing to pay 200 GP as teleportation fees?" she asked. Felix nodded his head as he put his bracket in the scanner. A second later, he withdrew his hand after receiving transfer notification. The receptionist gave him a smile as she gestured with her hand to pick one of the empty circles on the floor. Without further ado, Felix turned around and went for one of the empty circles. Unlike the base floor where people get teleported every second, those circles weren't that active, as Felix saw that only 5 people stepped out of them during the duration he entered the floor. It only made sense, as anyone who was taking the teleportation circles in the upper floors weren't like the broke commoners, who jumped from the circles the moment they got teleported, worrying about losing nearly 200 SC. After entering the circle, Felix didn't need to do or click anything, as the moment he paid the receptionist his destination was already set, no matter which circle he used. He just closed his eyes and waited to get teleported. However, right before his body disintegrated into light particles, he changed his outfit, name, and tag. Now, he wasn't Felix, but landlord holder of the unique title, wealthiest of them all. Are you going to participate in today's trials? Sigh, this is already my 5th attempt and probably my last. Good luck. The moment Felix's body reconstructed on the milky white circle, his ears began picking chatter of the people in front of him. In an unhurried manner, he opened his eyes and started sizing up everything before him. If he could describe the scene with 2 words, it would definitely be bustling and loud. He stepped outside of the circle while gazing beneath the darkness of his hoodie at the hundreds of people making tens lines that were leading to the exit of the teleportation company. Without delaying for a second, Felix chose the line nearest to him and lined up compliantly. If there was a mechanism that lets him skip lining up, he would have done so. Sadly, those lines were for checking up the identity of the newcomers, not to keep the crowd ordered. After all, this was a private city belonging to a league, not a kingdom or an empire. Every player with 200 GP could surely teleport, but no matter what he did, he could never bypass those checkup lines and go beyond the teleportation company. This meant those hundreds of people around Felix weren't just random individuals, but players belonging to gold rank or even a higher rank than it. Players who fulfilled one of the 3 requirements to be here. Felix was probably the only bronze player in the middle of those elites, who came from all around the Empire and the hundreds of kingdoms, just to participate in the trials and join the Ivy League. This should speak volumes about the desire of everyone to join this elitist organization. Oh! Landlord! Startled by the abrupt exclamation, Felix turned his head and saw a player he never knew before was pointing his finger at him with a tingle of shock in his voice. The rest of the players around them all shushed their chatter at the exclamation and focused on Felix, who was being pointed at. It's really him. Who is he? Don't you read the latest news? He is currently one of the hottest talked topics in the Empire. He destroyed a silver game solo and everyone in it. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #49793537000136311 for visiting. I read that he caused Goddess Zoe to get demoted to bronze. She deserves it. Sigh, if you guys watched his game, you will see that he was totally robbed from an MVP title. TSK, at least he got the unique title. A red-tailed man pointed his finger at the top of Felix's head, and just like he said, the rest saw a golden title, glittering under the light, almost blinding them after they focused on it too much. Since the unique title had only one purpose, and that was bragging, the SJ of course was going to make them appear as glamorous and flamboyant as possible. Felix wasn't planning to remain low-key and hid it after going through hell to collect that many points and obtain it. He wasn't that moronic or noble to not brag about his achievement when he had nothing to lose. Heck, he knew that the title was actually going to be beneficial in the market. Felix knew that by displaying his name and the title, he was going to receive a lot of attention in the city, especially after he just went viral in the Empire. However, that was exactly what he wanted, to be as high-profiled as possible. The more known his name got in this place, the better for him. Why? For 2 reasons: he would have a solid reputation in the city, which would make him have a better appeal to the shoppers who wanted to buy items from his prize pool quicker. The second and most important reason was that high-ranked players never deal business with unknown players. If he wanted to collect the materials without any hiccups, he needed to avoid laying low and make his presence be seen as much as possible. Exposing his name and the title was only the start. I do wonder what he is doing here though. I don't think he fulfilled the requirements to join the trials. Trials? I doubt he needs them. What do you mean? Without bothering to answer him, the player pointed his finger at the checkpoint that was getting closer and closer. His meaning was clear, see it yourself. After a minute or so, Felix's turn finally arrived. The line was moving pretty quickly as the staff merely asked two straight-to-the-point questions. Are you here to join the Ivy League? If so, please tell me which requirement did you fulfill? Yes, I have fulfilled the third requirement. Straightforward as well, Felix answered. Good, put your AP bracelet in the scanner please. The staff requested with a dry voice. Felix did as he was told, and waited for a positive response. Find updates on n/v/elben.co/m. Tearing! After hearing the sound, the staff recited in a swift manner, your application has been approved. If you want any further information about the rules, benefits, map of the city and such, please voice your request to the Queen. He pointed at the door behind him and said, Welcome to the Ivy League. You are now an official part of the organization. Elated by finally hearing those sweet words, Felix nodded his head in appreciation to the staff and walked with hurried steps towards the door, leaving the players behind him, staring at his back with dumbfounded expressions. Their speechlessness was understandable since not one of the players in those lines got approved instantly like Felix, giving them full freedom to move as they wished in the city. Instead, they either get thrown to the enforcers after being found that they didn't fulfill any of the 3 requirements or get sent to the venue where hellish trials were being held each day. 5 minutes later. Felix kept walking on the clean streets with a wide grin on his face. His eyes continued to roam around in absolute fascination. Unlike the Androxa capital and the Mariana capital, the Ivy League city wasn't massive to the point it stretched to infinity. In fact, it was built on a humble mountain chain that had all of its mountain summits smoothen up. And on each of those summits, there was either a unique towering building standing in the center or many smaller buildings tiered to each other in a circular shape, resembling a snail's shell. Currently, Felix was walking on the summit of the teleportation mountain. It was named as such since the main building of the teleportation company was based on the summit of this mountain. Since it was a known fact that the majority of people were always tiered around the teleportation companies, the entire summit of the mountain had nothing but the building and long streets, leading to many transportation means. Just like everyone else, Felix was heading for one of those means. He was a bit excited as in his previous life, every time he stepped into the city, he always gets sent to the Arena Mountain, where the trials were being held on a daily basis. But now he was finally free to go wherever he wanted in this city. After reaching the station, he was faced with a hologram that was highlighting all of the transportations currently available. He scrolled down the hover cars and chose a flying mount. Immediately after, a list packed with hundreds of flying mounts was displayed before him. Not wanting to get entangled in which one was better, Felix chose one randomly and paid for its services. Whoosh! Thud! The instant the coins were wired, a golden griffin landed on an empty platform next to Felix. Satisfied, Felix smiled widely while jumping on the back of the griffin. Caca! It let out a high-pitched whistling while flapping its golden wings twice, lifting itself up from the platform. Take me to the marketplace, Felix ordered while gripping its soft feathers tightly. Whoosh! The griffin lowered its head and started flapping its wings rapidly towards a mountain that had its summit completely bare. That's right, there wasn't a single building on the summit. But still, it was actually the most bustling place in the entire city. Due to Felix's current height, he was able to only see black dots clus tiered to each other akin to ants. However, as the griffin started to descend, those ants kept growing in his vision until he was able to see exactly what each one of them was doing. Thud! The griffin landed on an empty platform, making Felix sigh dejectedly at how short the flight was due to the close distance between the mountains. He jumped from the griffin and walked towards the noisy marketplace like it wasn't packed with elite players but with haggling grannies. Yet, what was even stranger was that the sellers neither had shops nor stalls, they were just sitting on a comfy armchair while having a huge hologram displayed before them. And the items showcased on those holograms would give a heart attack to any commoner. Finally, I am here. Felix murmured to himself as he walked through the rows and rows of those sellers all spread out on the summit in tens of straight lines to make it easier for the shoppers to glance at their products. After Felix toggled a good distance inside the market, he lifted his hand, which had the AP bracelet attached to, and called softly, "Queen, please scan for these materials: fountain purity drop, dark star fly dust, golem brass, voidling scales, and lastly, uncommon elemental flower." In a jiffy, the Queen used the AP bracelet scanning feature, making the bracelet emit invisible blue particles in 50 meters radius around Felix. I need to upgrade the bracelet. Felix frowned his eyebrows at this limited range. He knew that the current new generation of bracelets could allow the Queen to scan 500 meters or more. But for now, he focused on the materials. He just made a mental note to shop for another bracelet later on. The players near him weren't surprised by his weird pose, as a lot of players were doing the same in every part of the market. After all, in this market, there were thousands of sellers, yet no search bar to facilitate finding what one wanted. Soon, the Queen finished her scanning and informed him, "I found 4 materials of the mentioned list in those marked sellers." Felix looked around and saw 4 sellers marked in red particles by the Queen. He thanked her and moved towards the nearest one of them. After arriving near the seller, he saw that there was a small crowd of players that was surrounding him. Though only one player was actually talking to the seller as the rest were gazing in focus at nothing. Ignoring this sight, Felix aimed his bracelet at the huge hologram before him, and the content of it was copied in his bracelet. After doing so, he went to an empty spot and stood like the others, gazing at nothing. Though, that would appear to the rest, but for Felix, he was browsing items on an invisible holographic list. This list was exactly the same as the prize pool list he had in his games. From the limited 100 items to the limited stock available to trade. The only difference between them was that none of the items were the same. Except of course the elemental stones. Got you! After scrolling down to the bottom of the list, Felix showed a faint grin at finding the dark star fly dust. Plus, there were still 10 grams available in the stock. Though, Felix needed only 4 for the potion. He already bought 1 gram from the Beethoven auction with 320 million SC. Yet now, he was looking at this material that cost just 1000 GP per gram. Without wasting time, he closed the hologram and went to the seller. Trade or buy? The seller asked him in a straightforward manner. I want to buy 4 grams of the dark star fly dust. Felix answered, find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #5028389341632596 for visiting. As per the league's rules, please wire 4000 GP first and my 5% commission after the purchase. The seller informed Felix as he extended his AP bracelet to him. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix touched the seller's bracelet, sending him the needed amount. Felix was already familiar with the rules of the league, and he understood that he didn't need to worry about getting scammed or cheated out of his money. Everyone here was a member of the league, and based on rules, cheating another player had only one penalty, which was getting sent to mine elemental stones on mineral planets. One should never forget that elemental stones get created in the most hellish environments, each based on the element. For example, firestones could only be found on planets like Solaria Planet, the one Felix played Death Race in. Thus, those sellers could be trusted to not escape with his game points. Tearing! After hearing the sound of the notification, the seller withdrew his hand with a pleased smile on his face. He created a minimized version of the list and scrolled down until he located the material. He then clicked on Buy 4 grams only and closed down the hologram. Contract or not? The seller asked. Contract, please. Felix replied expressionlessly. Immediately after, the seller projected an invisible contract before Felix, entailing that Felix needed to pay him 5% of the total amount spent to buy the material. Reason? His labor fees. That's right, his labor fees for reaching the gold rank and obtaining this randomized prize pool in his game. You see, all of those players in the market were selling none other than items from the prize pools they obtained in their games. Obviously, none of those items were actually belonging to them but to the SGA. They were simply displaying the latest prize pool lists they got after playing a game to those interested in the items they left out on. This loophole was working only because players get 100 randomized items in the prize pool on each game. This meant there was a high chance for a player to get not a single item or resource that he wanted while getting an item that was desperately needed by another player. In other words, those two, if they met, could totally trade items or buy them for each other with a small labor commission for the troubles. This loophole was exiting for a long time now, and the SGA or the Queen never bothered to patch it up since it was actually beneficial for the Alliance's economy. The players weren't doing anything wrong as they simply used their own game points which they earned rightfully in their games to buy items from other lists. The only thing the SGA forbade was direct game points transfer. As for trading items or selling them, they were never bothered about it. Their indirect approval made this new emerging industry explode in popularity. To the point it got an official name, Prize Pool Free Trading. Vist and Velben.cm for new updates. Free trading in the sense every player in the platform no matter his rank was able to join as well, he just needed to play one game. That's all it took. Felix literally could right now find an empty spot in the summit and display his prize pool with the intention to sell. Though, he would rather not embarrass him like this as he was still in bronze rank, which meant those items were also below the interest of probably every player in the league. Thus, he only came here with the intention to buy the materials, nothing more, nothing less. After finishing reading the contract that was filled with the usual known terms, Felix signed it and sent it back to the seller. Before getting told what to do, Felix touched the bracelet of the seller, wiring the 200 GP commission. The seller nodded his head in satisfaction after seeing what he earned. He literally did absolutely nothing but display a list that belonged to the SGA and he earned 200 GP free. Though he did work his ass off to reach the gold rank, and that was something not any average Joe could do. Seeing his content expression, Felix smiled bitterly after remembering himself practicing this business on the Androxa's public market. Instead of getting rich players interested in buying from his prize pool, he was only getting commoners asking about what he was selling or even worse enforcers, trying to capture him due to selling without a permit. This was one of the reasons in his previous life that got him obsessed with joining the Ivy League. The fact those sellers before him could just sit here and chill, yet gain points fill their accounts without dropping a sweat. He always wanted to do the same, alas the trials were too hard for him. I believe you received the serial code of the materials? Felix's absent-mindedness was broken by the seller's polite question. Felix nodded his head after he checked that indeed, for serial codes were added to his AP bracelet. Glad to do business with you. The seller gave him a polite smile and gestured with his hand for the player waiting behind Felix patiently. Not wanting to block his business, Felix turned around and left, heading to the next seller that the Queen was marking. Felix wasn't afraid about the fact that his serial codes were known to the seller, as the contract they signed forbade the seller from utilizing the code directly or indirectly. Nothing could fool the Queen's vision. 15 minutes later, Felix went through all of the marked sellers and obtained all the materials needed except for the last one. The uncommon elemental flower. He spent around 19,500 to buy 14 fountain purity drops, 1 golem brass, 4 darkstar fly dust, and 2 voidling scales. With the dawn tree leaf that he bought in the auction before, he currently only needed the uncommon elemental flower, and he could make contact with a witch to concoct the potion for him. If it wasn't for the second game and the massive amount of game points he obtained, he would have taken at least a year or so to gather those materials. Though, he was still having difficulty finding the uncommon elemental flower. He continued to skin every once in a while, yet the Queen always gave him negative results. Felix wasn't really surprised about the lack of this material, as he knew that it was extremely useful to any bloodliner alive. This put him in a pickle, as this material was a must-buy since it was the core of the potion. It was known for being split into 3 grades: common element flower, which possessed a petal for each of the 7 known common elements. Uncommon elemental flower possessed a petal for those 7 common elements in addition to every uncommon element in the universe. Finally, the all-elemental flower, which had every single element whether it's known or not. Sadly, this flower already went extinct. This flower had many uses besides being a core material to the elemental potion. The most known use was actually ingesting it directly. Doing so helps to increase the affinity rating by 3%. Though, it was a must to have an element corresponding to a petal for that effect to take place. For Felix, who needed the uncommon flower to make an elemental potion that had all the elements except for the rare ones, this made it challenging for him to acquire one. After going around the market 2 times in a row and still coming up with either don't have it or sold out, Felix decided to take a quick break and continue browsing. He was planning to camp in the market until he gets what he wanted. After all, the gathering was going to last for 3 days. This meant there would be new sellers tomorrow, replacing the ones who had all of their stock either bought by shoppers or players from the game they got the prize pool. Felix knew that prize pools weren't monopolized by 1 player or 2, but by all the players participating in that said game. For example, Felix's current prize pool was being shared by all the surviving players from the shuffle maze. The stock was being shared as well. This meant the prize pools don't really last for long before getting all of the good items wiped out clean. The/W novel chapters are published on no/vel/bin.co/m. This was the reason the Ivy League made 3 days gathering each month. They wanted to give the sellers and the buyers a specific period to do business before the prize pools get sapped out. Heck, the majority of the players in the league were playing games exactly 1 day before the gathering, so if they made it out alive, their stock would be still full and fresh. 2 days later at 6 a.m., Felix was standing in the middle of the market with his hand in the air. A few seconds later, the Queen's monotonous voice resounded in his mind with a sentence he heard about thousands of times now: "The material has not been detected in this area. F***ck my life." Felix massaged his weary bloodshot eyes in frustration. He was awake for straight 54 hours now, and even though he was in the UVR, his brain still needed rest from being active for such a long period of time. Just as he planned to lower his hand and move to another area, the Queens informed him, "The material has been spotted. The seller is being marked." Ecstatic, Felix opened his bloodshot eyes widely as he kept looking around, wanting to find the marked seller. Soon, he saw a female player, who had absolutely no one next to her. Immediately after seeing so, he understood that she had just sat in her position and was about to start selling her products. Without delaying for a split second, he dashed towards her and said softly, "I want to buy an uncommon elemental flower." "Why talk so soft? Am I not selling just an uncommon elemental flower?" she said while laughing out loud, making her voice reach the ears of the players near them. She understood that he didn't want others to hear about the flower so he wouldn't have anyone contesting for it. But, was she his sister to give him such a freebie? Uncommon elemental flower? Nice, I got just enough for it. Finally! Been searching for it for a month now. Yes. I need just 3% to reach a 70% affinity rating. More and more players kept gathering around them as the news was being spread further and further in the market by the loud chatter. Suddenly, Felix, who was standing all by himself before, was now surrounded by desperate F***ck's just like him, who needed this material at all cost. He. Amused, she chuckled as she looked at his twitching lips and clenched fists until his hands were turned paler. She knew that he was holding himself from cursing her mother to the grave. All right, ladies and gentlemen. She stood up on her armchair and smiled, we will do this the traditional way. She highlighted the flower on the humongous hologram and said, the standard price to buy the flower is 4,000 GP. My 5% commission from it will be 200 GP. She grinned widely and announced, start the auction. 300 GP. 400 GP. 600 GP. 750 GP. Each time Felix heard a newer bid, he felt like his heart got stabbed by a dagger. He understood that what the players were currently bidding for wasn't the flower but the commission itself. This meant the higher bidder would need to pay the standard 4,000 GP for the flower plus the amount he bade. 1,500 GP. 1,520 GP. 1,550 GP. 2,050 GP. After seeing that the bids were finally slowing down, Felix decided to join by increasing 500 GP at once, hoping to scare everyone off. Well, he sure did, as everyone who heard him turned towards him, wanting to see who was that desperate to buy the flower with a whopping 6,050 GP. The wealthiest of them all? The hell is that title? The moment their eyes landed on the glittering gold title, their eyelids couldn't help but twitch. They didn't know what condition he fulfilled in the game to get that unique title, but they sure know now that it was related to game points. There was no way they were going to contest with such a person. They might be above Felix in rank, but the majority of them never had an above 10k GP collected in their account. If it was so easy to gather them, everyone would start joining the league by the third requirement. I am out, it's already above my budget. Sigh, I really wanted it. The gathered players started to spread, heading to other sellers. They might want to increase their affinity rating, but 60-50 GP was too much for just a 3% affinity increase. There were other worthy items to buy with that item. 20-50 GP going once. 20-50 GP going twice. The seller paused for a few seconds after her shout, trying to delay for a bit. She hoped that someone might change his mind. Unfortunately, everyone was leaving while shaking their heads. In the end, she just sighed and called, sold. Clap, clap. The players who remained started applauding after the flower was auctioned. Habits were really hard to change. Felix nodded at them in appreciation while extending his AP bracelet towards the seller. She swiftly touched his bracelet, getting wired only the standard 4,000 GP for the flower. In a haste, she tapped purchase, worried that someone from her game was going to snatch it before her. Tearing. Fortunately, the sound of the anticipated notification resounded in the area, making both Felix and the seller sigh in relief at the same time. She smiled charmingly in his direction while he merely gave her a middle finger. Unbothered by his reaction, she laughed and sent him the contract. She didn't even bother to ask him like the first seller, find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #50302172545471350 for visiting. After reading it carefully for a couple of minutes, Felix signed it and wired her the remaining 2050 GP. Immediately after getting paid her commission, she sent him the serial code and said, "Glad to do business with you. I wish you die in your next game." Leaving behind him the most famous curse between players, Felix turned around and walked away through the crowded market. "You too!" she yelled with a merry smile on her face. Nothing was going to affect her happiness of getting a free 2050 GP without losing anything. Sadly, the same couldn't be said about Felix, who just spent almost the entire 26k GP that he had on all of the materials. He was left with merely 2k GP or less. 14 hours later, in Felix's Androxa house. "Peep. Peep. Shut it off, Queen," Felix murmured with his eyes closed shut. Too bad, the alarm kept going off, forcing him to open his muddled eyes. The moment his eyes were opened, the Queen turned off the alarm. Felix looked at his AP bracelet and saw that he actually slept for 14 hours straight. The moment he secured all the materials in the Ivy Market, he teleported to the Androxa capital and went to get some rest in his house. He was too tired to contact a witch and enter a business deal with her. After 5 minutes, he was sitting at the living room table, which was filled with food. He picked an apple and took a bite while having a hologram in front of him that was displaying a list of names with data at the side. // Name, W1. Ikram / potions, elemental potion, advanced rejuvenation potion, tonic of hatred, filter of love / total success rate, 39%. Name, W2. Mina / potions, brew of weakness, potion of shielding, elemental potion, flask of reversed growth / total success rate, 41%. Name, W3. Hala / potions, potion of fortitude, tonic of fury, elemental potion, vial of perception / total success rate, 49%, // The moment Felix spotted a 49% success rate, he swiftly stopped scrolling the list of the witches who could concoct the elemental potion and clicked on the name W3. Hala. Immediately after, a side hologram emerged in his right, displaying a detailed profile interface of the witch. // name, Hala. Witch rank, 3. Success rates, elemental potion equals 49%, / potion of fortitude equals 51%, / tonic of fury equals 49%, /. Current queue number, 359. Reviews, 4511, // Totally ignoring the rest of the details down the profile interface, Felix focused on the success rate of the elemental potion as well as the queue line. "Not a bad rate honestly," he said, pleased. Even though the witch success rate wasn't above 50%, Felix knew that for such a problematic potion to concoct, that rate was extremely good. Specifically for merely a rank 3 witch. Though, he wasn't pleased by the long queue line, which entailed that 359 orders were placed before him. Still, he knew that it was better than contacting a witch with a smaller queue line but tragic success rate. He would rather wait months before his potions turn than risk losing all his materials and the exorbitant concoction fees after the potion concoction fails. Without further ado, he clicked her displayed phone number and waited for a couple of seconds before his call got connected. "Good evening, this is Witch Hala's assistant. How can I help you?" A mellow, enthusiastic female voice resonated in the room. Not surprised with getting received by an assistant, Felix answered, "Hello, I want to place an order." "With pleasure, sir. May I know which potion you want to concoct?" she asked. "Elemental potion." "Good, I assume that you have collected all the necessary materials, correct?" she asked. "Indeed." "Excellent. I believe that you have seen your position in the queue is going to be 360. This meant it's going to be a while until Madame Hala addresses your order. She asked, "Are you all right with those arrangements? May I ask when exactly is it going to be my turn?" Instead of answering, Felix asked her. Based on Madame Hala's concoction speed, it will take around 2 months or so before she focuses on your potion. She replied. 2 months? Right before the world representative battle. He pondered for a second before telling her, "All right, that works for me. May I know how much it will cost me?" "It depends on the grade of your elemental flower. If you are planning on using the common grade, the fees are 200 million. On the other hand, the fees for the uncommon are 350 million. SSSSSS. Felix drew a deep breath through his nose, trying his best to not curse. He knew that the price was going to be exorbitant, but still, he didn't think it would reach 350 million. She swiftly clarified after hearing his silence, concocting with uncommon elemental flower is going to be harder by 5 times than using a common elemental flower, thus an extra fee is needed. She added, plus, Madame Hala's success rate is quite high when compared to her sister witches. Hence, the price is completely justified. Though Felix understood what she meant, he was still pained by the amount. "Can I have a discount since this is my first purchase?" he asked with a hopeful tone. "Sorry." "Sigh, whatever, please email me the contract." Dispirited, he said while rubbing his eyelids. "I'm happy that you chose Madame Hala's services. We hope we won't disappoint your expectation," she said with an uplift tone. He might feel downcast, but the assistant was sure glad about securing another order. "Goodbye," Felix said, hanging up. The moment he received the contract, there was no need to continue talking to her. He soon opened his email inbox and found that the email was buried between 3 new emails. It seems like agencies, clans, and such were still not getting the memo that he had no interest in contacting any one of them. After opening the email, he read it slowly with his eyes while marking things that he needed later, like the address of the witch. After all, he needs to send those materials to her, and he knew that it was going to cost him a leg since the Forsythia Witch Empire was in a completely different galaxy. The only good news about this was that their galaxy was only 3.5 million light-years away from the Milky Way galaxy, which was going to facilitate the deliveries between them and also the shipping fees. After a while, he wrote down his own address as well on the contract and signed it. He then sent it back to the assistant. As for the payment, it was wired automatically after he signed, taking away the streaming revenue that he just got. Let's see when that fatty is going to arrive. After dealing with the potion situation, Felix murmured while checking on the time. Soon, he saw that only 1 hour was left before Bodadai brings him his delivery to the island. After all, 3 days had gone since he gave Bodadai the serial codes for the 5 bloodline bottles and melon fish leg. He didn't inform the queen before he slept to help him wake up for no reason. He was worried that he would oversleep and Bodadai would find him still in the VR pod. Based on that bastard's personality, he would spit on the VR pod and throw the bottles on the floor then leave hastily. Felix didn't want that to happen as he still needed to talk to him and also give him the useless bottles to be sold to Luby. He was relying on Luby to pay the debt of Mr. Gowadi. This was kind of funny as Felix literally would have to add only 5% of each bottle's original price then give the total amount to Mr. Gowadi. 1 hour later, in the real world. Whoosh! A medium-sized wormhole was opened in the middle of Felix's sweet living room. Felix grinned after seeing the blue-scaled fatty worm wiggle inside the room with a bit of difficulty. Though, in the end, he managed to push himself through. Thud. Brother Fatty, I see that you started relaxing on your diet, Felix said while leaning on the wall. I see that you are still being a prick. Fatty Worm made an X shape with his receptors, giving Felix the worm race's special middle finger. Felix chuckled and asked him, "Did you get everything?" Not replying, Fatty Worm opened his tiny mouth widely and spat 5 sealed bottles and a small blue box. "And with this, you have only 2 more free shipments." Bodadai's receptors kept flailing around, expressing his joy at almost fulfilling his part of the contract and getting rid of Felix. Instead of feeling saddened by the news of almost finishing his 17 free shipments, Felix just grinned with a hidden glint while looking at the happy worm dancing in his own universe. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click #503095722204817777 for visiting. However, soon he changed his expression to a dejected one as he beamed the bottles and the box in his spatial card. Cough. "Do you need me to deliver anything while I am here?" Abashed, Bodadai asked while rubbing his receptors together akin to a greedy merchant rubbing his hands. Felix knew that the bastard was asking if he was going to give him any under-the-table delivery to get the bribe. "Yes, wait for me here." Pleased by his confirmation, Bodadai immediately laid on the couch, making himself comfortable. He knew that Felix was going to take some time before giving him the items to deliver like before. Not wanting to waste time, Felix went to his bedroom and closed the door shut. "Asna, time to work," Felix said while removing his clothes, preparing to separate the essence of the J. Rumungandra beast in a new bottle while giving the original bottles to Fatty Worm. "Let's get it over with." Lazy and bored, Asen yawned while watching him beam bottles, potions, injection needles on the bed. 25 minutes later. Felix exited the bedroom with a wide grin. Even the blind Bodadai was able to notice it. Though, he didn't ask him about it. "Be quick, give me the items," he said, rushing Felix. "I already wired you the payment," Felix said while beaming the 5 bottles in front of Bodadai. If Bodadai was a human or cared about knowing in detail the human bloodline system, he would have realized that Felix was doing something weird to the bottles before giving them back to him. Fortunately, Fatty Worm already had too many things on his plate to give a rat shit about Felix's matters. Whoosh! He swiftly sucked them on his stomach and created another wormhole, planning to bounce away. However, Felix wasn't finished with him yet as he said, "Wait, I need you to pick up those materials and take them to the Forsythia Witch Empire." Felix tapped on his bracelet and a hologram with those materials' serial codes were displayed in the room. Bodadai requested from the queen to read those serial codes for him. Soon, he nodded his head then shook it. "I can collect those materials from the Empire and bring them here or wherever you want me to. However, I can't make cross-galaxies deliveries. That's not my job and my space element manipulation isn't even that good to create wormholes across galaxies." "I see." Felix sighed and said, "Then deliver them to the Galactical Cargo Company. I will inform them about your arrival." "All right." Bodadai turned around and entered the wormhole. Seeing that he was struggling a bit, Felix gave him a push. Unsurprisingly, with Felix's current strength it was more than enough. Whoosh! After seeing that the wormhole was closed, Felix contacted the GCC and informed them about his incoming shipment. It didn't take even a minute before they concluded the deal. Felix wasn't worried that the human company with their cargo space.I.P.S would take millions of years to reach the Witch Empire by traveling at the speed of light. He knew that the cargo space.I.P.S were going to take about a week tops to reach the Witch Empire by traveling through the wormhole expressway that was connecting the 2 empires. Those wormholes were of course created and owned by the space worm race. Between every kingdom, empire, or galaxy there was a wormhole expressway connecting them together akin to a highway between cities or bridges between islands. Read lat.stchs on n/v/l.b.i.cm. Everyone could use those wormholes as long as they have a permit given by the space worm race and also paid the fees needed to travel. If the metal race was the technological backbone of the universe, then the spaceworm race was the transportation overlord of the universe. Ha ha, ha ha ha. After seeing that he was finally all alone, the overwhelming joy that he was trying his best to hold exploded all at once, as he let out a loud hearty laugh. Startled by Felix's sudden outburst, James raised an eyebrow for a second before lowering it down as nothing happened. Geez. All you found was 25% essence, no need to burst my ears with your annoying laugh. Asna closed her ears in irritation. That's right. Felix hit the motherlode as he found a whopping 25% Remungandr essence from those 5 epic bottles. Well, actually, he only found the essence in 4 bottles. As for the last one, it turned null. Regardless, 25% was more than enough to brighten Felix's entire next week. As with it, he could reach 76% in his integration at once, unlocking 2 active abilities in the Greater Purity and 2 passives in the Minor Step before the Origin Purity. After the integration he pulled off the past 25 minutes, he was left with 20% after adding 5% to the 51% that he already had. If he wasn't worried about having Bodadai listen to his screams, he would have integrated with 9% at once due to his cheerfulness. 14 days later. Inside the training room, Felix was standing right in the center of a wide arena. He snapped his finger and 20 bots surrounded him in a 20-meter radius. Just as he was about to give the order to start the training, his AP bracelet started ringing. Here it comes. After seeing who the caller was, Felix merely sighed and picked up, greeting in pure delight, "Grandpa. You finally called. I thought you forgot about me after regaining your vigor." "Heh, as much as I want to bicker with you, kid, I have other important matters to handle." Robert didn't waste a single second as he asked him with a stern voice, "Be quick, are you coming today or tomorrow?" Cough, neither, cough. Felix swiftly added after hearing his grandfather's heavy breathing, "The hotel just started the remodeling, I can't leave it yet. But, I promise that I will arrive on the day of the final tournament." "Felix, are you trying to anger me to death?" Robert shouted, "Do you King think I don't know that you spend your entire time in the UVR?" Just as Felix braced himself for getting chided, he heard his grandfather calm sigh, "I don't care what you do inside the UVR, but from time to time do check on the real-world situation a bit. 7 sit nvelb/n. C/m for L test vels." What does he mean? Felix wondered to himself. But in his situation, he never actually wondered alone, as Asna was always listening to him, waiting for such a beautiful mess-ups to belittle him. "Do you have the memory of a goldfish or what?" She snickered, "Did you forget already what happened in the world during this month?" This month? Numb to her belittling tone, Felix dug through his memories, trying to remember exactly what both of them meant. It didn't take him even a split second before those memories surfaced on his mind. They were always there, they just never crossed his mind. Now that they did, his eyes widened in stupefaction. F*ck me. How could I forget about that? "Felix, you still there? You better come tomorrow if you want to catch a flight with us." Robert informed him sternly, "We will send a jet to bring you home. Can't you just send a jet to pick me up 15 days later during the final tournament?" Felix asked with a ray of hope in his tone. "Why ask when you know my answer?" Robert laughed, "We all want to see you as soon as possible. Don't you miss us as well?" "I am going to hang up. I need to pack my stuff." Too annoyed to respond, Felix shooed Robert away and requested the Queen to log him out, not even finishing his daily training. TSHSHS. Felix got out of the pod and went to his closet to dress up. He pulled his suitcase from under his bed and started packing up some clothes on it. He closed it and put it to the side. His necessary clothes were always in his spatial card. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #49840723138245232 for visiting. He called Layla and informed her that he was leaving tomorrow to attend the competition. Layla asked him if he wanted extra guards on his VR pod after he leaves, to which he told her that wouldn't be necessary. He wasn't a fool to leave the VR pod here all alone while he could just take it with him inside his spatial card. It was big enough to hold the pod. After all, it was Blackma, gifted to him by Fatty Worm. That's exactly what he did after he hung up. He pulled the pod's cable from the wall's outlet and beamed it in his spatial card. After seeing that he didn't leave anything important in the room, he sat on his bed and requested the Queen to show him the most popular live stream news in the US. It had been a really long time since he checked on what was going on his own planet. The fact he was living on an island isolated from the public made it even easier to lose touch with the rest. As expected, Felix crossed his hands while watching a reporter interviewing a gray-bearded old man who was surrounded by a crowd of people near the airport. The crowd wasn't small one bit, as wherever Felix's eyes landed, he spotted a bunch of people tiered, pushing and pulling each other. It was clear that everyone was desperate to enter the airport. Hopeless, Felix sighed at that sight and refocused on the reporter, who appeared like he was about to be a victim of a stampede. So your grandson had been chosen to attend the nation's qualifiers. The reporter pushed the mic near the old man's face while asking, "How do you feel about his chances in qualifying to the final tournament?" "Ha ha. You jest. My little boy has already reached lesser purity and got an ability. An active ability." The old man took the mic from the reporter's hands and said in a vigorous manner, "You should have seen it." He was waving a whip made of flames, turning anything in his path into ash. How could he not qualify? The old man turned his head behind him and shouted to the people standing behind him, "Am I right?" "Yes, Dad, we get it already." The old man's son, who pushed through the crowd, swiftly pulled his excited father away from the reporter. He couldn't believe that his father has just laid down his son's ability in public. He knew that for his son to have a slight chance of rising above the rest of the participants, he needed to have his abilities hidden as much as possible. Alas, his father already spilled the beans on live TV. Honestly, the father was being paranoid for no reason, as his son was merely one average participant from 1,000 of awakened commoners who were nurtured in public government camps, sons of nouveau rich families, recruits from companies, juniors nurtured by private organizations, and such. All of those juniors applied to have their affinity rating get tested in public assessment centers, which were being built like mushrooms all around the world. The ones who had a good affinity rating, reaching 50% or above, were able to join public camps built and funded by the governments around the world. Those camps were free and also followed the same structure as Felix's family training camp. Though, the competition inside them was beyond vicious, as rare rank bloodlines were limited to only a few juniors per camp. Luckily for Felix, he wasn't born a commoner on Earth. Otherwise, he would have needed to spend at least 2 months struggling in a camp to just secure a rare bloodline, and then 6 months of hell to secure a qualifier spot in the competition that was about to start tomorrow. After all, it was impossible for all the Awakeners to join the U.S. national team battle. The U.S. is a big country with 50 states, and each state had its own public camp, which was packed with juniors attempting to awaken. Thus, the national team battle was split into 3 stages to not get messy by the large influx of participants. Stage 1 happened in the public camps, in which tournaments raged in them to decide who would join the qualifiers. Stage 2 was obviously the qualifiers competition that was going to start tomorrow in Florida. Each camp sent 10 winners, making a full rooster team. Since there were 50 states, it meant the total sum of juniors reached a whopping 500. They would have to compete with each other for the next 15 days until only 50 of them were left. This leads us to the third stage, which was the final tournament. The Maxwell family's team was going to join this tournament straight away, just like the rest of the business empire's families, or political families. The reason those families were given a free pass straight to the final was due to the fact they created their own camps and nurtured their own people with the best resources possible on Earth. This meant they relieved the government while also giving them a world representative potential candidates. It was only natural they get a free pass to the final tournament as compensation. But honestly, they would have got it either way. After all, there was no way those noble families would accept to send their heirs to tangle and get messy with the commoners. The qualifier competition was the reason the airport behind the reporter was packed to the brim with people carrying suitcases and wearing cheering outfits. Everyone was trying to fly to Florida where the main venue of the competitions would be held. The hype for seeing Earthlings use superpowers and abilities for the very first time was about to cripple the entire country's transportation services. Train stations, highways, buses, and even seaports were all experiencing a flood of people trying to book a ticket to Florida City. This wasn't happening just in the US, but worldwide. It was only common sense that people would prefer watching Earthlings bloodliners compete with their abilities live. They already saw through the SG free stream channels how other human races in the Milky Way galaxy used those abilities. Right now, they were dying to see their own people, born and raised on Earth, demonstrate that Earthlings were also capable of achieving everything other races were able to. Too bad their excessive excitement and eagerness made it almost impossible to catch single available transportation. And for Felix, who was planning to take a boat from the island to California, then a plane to Florida a month later, that would be impossible to do. Only after being reminded by his grandfather and Asna did he remember how the situation was like in this month. Thus, he had to pack up and join the family's flight, as he did in his previous life. After seeing that the reporter was having difficulty asking questions due to the bustling noise, Felix waved the hologram away from his face and went for a quick shower. Tomorrow morning, in the airport runway, Felix was dragging his suitcase behind him as he approached the parked jet that had just landed. No one accompanied him to send him away, as he drove all by himself without informing Layla and Jack. He knew that they were beyond busy with managing the island, and there was no need to steal their time just for a send-off. After he reached the jet, he gave his suitcase to the steward and climbed the stairs, entering swiftly. "Welcome, Mr. Felix." The pilot and the co-pilot both extended their hands towards Felix the moment he stepped inside the plane. "Thank you." Felix shook both of their hands and asked with a polite smile, "Are we heading straight to Florida?" "I apologize, but we need to meet up with family first in Boston before going to Florida." The pilot clarified, "The family planes are barely enough to send the members of the family to the venue. Thus, we received orders to pick you up and bring you back home instead of taking you to the venue." "All right, thank you for the ride." Felix nodded his head in appreciation and went to find a seat. The private jet was one of the big ones, which were able to carry at least 15 passengers. Yet, Felix had it all to himself. He quickly sat and put on the seatbelt. He closed his eyes and requested the Queen to log him in. The flight was 7 to 8 hours long. Felix wanted to continue his training in this period. It was better than sitting doing nothing. "Sir." "Felix, the plane is about to land." The Queen's monotonous voice resounded in Felix's mind as he narrowly dodged a metal claw that was aiming at his neck. Pause. Nonchalant by the frozen flames and icy rocks near his face, Felix requested the Queen to log him out. 10 minutes later. Felix removed the seatbelt and stood up. He exited the private jet while stretching his arms behind his back. The moment he got outside, he saw many private jets all parked away from each other, while near each one 13 or so members of his family were standing and conversing together. All of them were dressed up neatly. Felix wasn't surprised by the sight, as he knew that every relative of his was going to the venue to spectate the competition and cheer for them. Elders, seniors, and juniors, not one of them were left behind. Even the elders, who always had busiest schedule, dropped everything on their subordinates and came with them. After gazing for a while, Felix finally spotted his grandfather, wearing a black business suit with a red tie, conversing with Elder Albert and Elder Charlotte. Felix almost couldn't recognize him, as his grandfather actually grew some hair. But Felix wasn't really that startled. He knew that was simply the longevity potion's long-term effect. The potion didn't just add longevity and remove diseases. In fact, it made the consumer appear a lot younger than his true age. Since Robert was in his 70s, the potion would slowly help him regress his aged look into appearing as a middle-aged man. Content with the way his grandfather looked, Felix smiled warmly while walking down the private jet's stairs, heading towards him. Felix! However, just as his feet landed on the runaway asphalt, an elated feminine yell resounded in the area. Without needing to guess, Felix immediately knew who called for him. Vexed and a bit amused, he saw Olivia running towards him with an excited expression. The yellow lily flower on her head kept flailing left and right, matching the speed of her little legs. Good thing she was wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and sports sneakers instead of a dress. Otherwise, she would have tripped already. Olivia's loud yell managed to draw everyone's attention to her. Soon, they also noticed Felix standing before the staircase, wearing his usual sunglasses. That rascal finally arrived. Robert grumbled while looking at Felix, who was being hugged by Olivia. He quickly approached them with the elders following behind him. "Ollie, when did you turn this clingy?" Though Felix was saying so, he was hugging her back with a faint smile. "I just missed you." She removed herself from the hug and pouted, "You never called or bothered to receive my calls." "How would I dare accept your calls after that one time?" His eyelids twitched as he said, "You detained me for 2 hours straight in one call." "Oh. Grandpa Robert is here." Embarrassed after remembering that day, Olivia swiftly changed the subject by mentioning Robert and the rest of the elders, who were walking towards them. Amused, Felix chuckled while touching the lily flower on her head. It seemed like it was growing in a steady manner, as it was a lot bigger than the last time he saw it. Her bloodline might be rare rank, but it had its own perks as well, and this lily flower was essential to Olivia's abilities. It wasn't just for decoration like Felix's mutations. Get the latest chapters on n/velbin.com. So you hug only girls or what? The moment Robert reached next to Felix, his sarcastic attitude took over. "I see that you finally grew some hair." Felix wasn't the one to back down either, as he continued while sizing up his grandfather, "Aren't you dressed too well? You even groomed your beard. Are you going to root for us or for a date? Robert is currently in high demand." Albert interjected himself in the middle of their conversation by saying enviously, "The women in the bar always offers him free drinks." Somehow, Felix truly believed him as his grandfather's face started to regain some youthfulness. His skin wasn't as wrinkled or gray as before. Plus, his muddy eyes had a tingle of l.u.s.ter on them, seen only on youthful men. "Hee, isn't this because of my grandson?" Robert gave a smug smile to Albert as he hugged Felix as well. "All right, enough low-key bragging." Abraham looked at his AP bracelet and said, "Let's carry our conversation in the jet. We need to leave now." Immediately after saying so, Abraham sent a message to all of the seniors, telling them to board the private jets. The juniors soon followed them inside. Dejected, Felix climbed up the stairs, re-entering the jet. He didn't even walk for 2 steps on the ground before getting back inside. Though, this time he wasn't alone, as the 5 elders all joined him in the plane, as well as Olivia, Sarah, Noah, Kenny, and the rest of the team. The elders arranged for them to be all together in one jet, in order to catch up with Felix. They had a lot of questions to ask and a lot of things to inform him about. "Ollie, come sit next to me." Felix patted the leather seat next to him as he offered. Obviously, Olivia didn't reject him. "TSK, little bastard, preferring little Ollie over me." Robert clicked his tongue in criticism after seeing the seat he was planning to take got offered to Olivia. He wanted to catch up to his grandson on the plane, but now he could only sit next to the cheapskate Albert with an annoyed expression. After a while, the jet took flight, heading speedingly towards Florida. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, the elders stood from their seats and surrounded Felix, akin to debt collectors seeking their payment. All of them had their hands crossed above their chest as they kept watching him teasing Olivia's lily flower. After sensing 10 eyes boring into him, Felix lifted his head and saw the 5 elders all looking at him with a wide grin. Except for Charlotte, as her cold face remained the same as always. "What's up?" Felix asked in confusion. "Hee, nothing much." Abraham grinned as he said, "We just wanted to know what you have been doing the past months." Immediately after hearing such an expected question, Felix automatically entered his bullshit mode and began telling them that he spent those 2 months either watching games and analyzing them or selling and buying in public markets. "Oh. So you have a stall?" Charlotte asked. "Yes, it doesn't require a permit or license." He sighed dejectedly, "Though, I have to always be prepared for a run, to not get caught by the patrolling enforcers." "I see, just be careful, and if you needed any help with coins just tell me so," Robert said, smiling. "Will do." Felix's eyelids twitched as he said so. If only they knew that the coins he was offering were his in the first place. Now to important matters. Abraham looked at him with a stern expression and asked, "What's your current integration?" In a heartbeat, Felix answered that he was already on greater purity. The elders sighed in relief after hearing so. They honestly thought that he would be still on 45% or even lower, based on the fact he didn't reach lesser purity in 4 months. "That's good, very good." Abraham smiled gleefully while looking at Felix, Olivia, and Noah, the 3 juniors, who reached greater purity. Though, Noah was actually about to reach the origin purity. The elders felt more than pleased by those 3, as Charlotte Intel brought her information that the majority of the families had only 1 greater purity bloodliner in their ranks. As for their true rivals, they had at most 2. With Felix's addition, they had a pretty much higher chance to make their team represent the US against the world. "So what abilities did you unlock exactly?" Albert crossed his forearms on the top of Felix's seat while asking, "Both your new passive and acti." Ring, ring. Before he continued his sentence, his AP bracelet interrupted him by ringing continuously. If Albert's bracelet was the only one ringing, he might have ignored the call. However, the elder's bracelet soon followed by ringing as well. After seeing who was calling them, they exchanged wary glances and went back to their seats at the front of the jet. Curious, Felix and Olivia both removed the seatbelt and peeked at the elders, who were listening to Abraham's call that was on speaker. A couple of seconds later, Abraham's raging voice resounded in the jet, "This is bullshit and you know it." The rest of the elders were also not pleased by what they heard, as even Charlotte's composure broke at the bad news they just received. "Interesting." Since the call was on speaker, Felix and Olivia managed to pick up their conversation a bit clearer than the rest, as they were the closest to the elders. What Felix heard made him realize that his actions finally started affecting the known timeline in other places. It turned out, the call was from the Earthlings Supremacy Games Originization US branch, or in short, ESGO US branch. This organization was created to handle any matter related to the SG or UVR. For example, the current government public camps, the assessment centers, the national team battles, and also the world representative battles, all were under their jurisdiction. It was an international neutral organization that belonged to the World Council. Each country was required to have a branch of this organization on its soil to facilitate handling those matters. Right now, they just called the elders, informing them that the national team battle had changed its rules. Obviously, the elders weren't pleased one bit by those changes as it affected their team the hardest. Based on what Felix heard, the rules changes affected the number of bloodliners each family could bring. Before the changes, each family was allowed to bring at most 10 awakened juniors. However now, the number was limited to only 6. For the Maxwell family, which had 9 bloodliners in their ranks, that was a fatal blow to them. The fact they needed to remove 3 juniors from their team while their rivals only needed to remove 1 or none at all, made the elders feel cheated and most of all livid. Felix knew that such a sudden rules change never occurred in his previous life. The families all had 4 to 7 bloodliners max, and for the Maxwell family, it had only 5 juniors awakened, Felix included. But after he changed the awakening practice method, the number reached 9. This changed the timeline into a different course. Only now did Felix finally see the result of his interference in the fabric of time. Though he didn't know if the timeline was trying to fix itself by removing the added 3 juniors or this was merely a result of a scheme by someone. He understood that the ESGO US branch would not make such a drastic change right before the qualifiers were about to start. Someone or a group must have forced their hands one way or another. Felix wasn't the only one with such thoughts, as Charlotte immediately contacted her intel team, giving them a mission to investigate this hidden attack on their family, while the rest of the elders were still raging and making their displeasure heard in the ears of the caller. The juniors on the plane already knew what was happening from what the elders were saying out loud, and they didn't like it one bit. Especially the weakest bunch in the team. "Are we gonna get kicked out of the team?" Sarah suddenly asked Johnson, the fog element user who took her seat after Olivia ditched her. "I doubt they will kick you." Johnson gave a side glance at 3 juniors behind him, who were conversing with worried expressions and clarified, "The ones in danger are them, not us." Sarah understood what he meant instantly, as only those 3 were the ones who still didn't reach 45% in their integration. As for both of them, they were going to reach the greater purity in 2 integrations or 3. "If we found that your branch had any dealing with other families, we will take this to your organization headquarters." Abraham shouted, "You better prepare yourselves." Cluck! He hung up the moment he laid down his threat, though it was more like throwing a fit than fulfilling what he just said. Abraham knew that currently, the ESGO US branch was one of the most authoritative organizations in the States, and there was no way his family's power could deal with them. Plus, they already had enough enemies and rivals waiting for a chance to pounce on their assets. There was no need to add that behemoth into the ranks of their enemies. However, finding out who had enough authority to force such an entity into changing the competition's rules was a must. 10 minutes later, Charlotte bracelet ringed, interrupting the elders' discussion. Charlotte immediately picked up the call after seeing that it was from one of her subordinates. This time, she didn't put the call on speaker, as she listened privately to her subordinate task report with a solemn expression. The elders kept waiting in silence for her to end her conversation before asking about the results. Thankfully, Charlotte hanged up in a minute or so. Before needing them to ask, she looked at them with a serious expression and said only one name, Hilton's. "It truly was them," Albert said, sighing. Unexpectedly, the elders neither had looks of surprise nor shock about the name of the progenitor. Honestly, they were more surprised and interested in knowing about the method used by the Hilton family to pull that off. They knew way too much about the Hilton family to realize that it was impossible for them to solely force the organization into changing the rules. As they say, the one who knows you the best isn't your friend but your rival. And the Hilton family was one of the oldest rivals for the Maxwell family. Their rivalry was totally understandable, as their main business was both related to hotels and real estate. Both of them had hundreds of hotels spread in 120 countries or more. Since their hotels were ranging from 4 stars to 6 stars, it meant they were always being compared by their guests. This led those families to always try to outdo or hinder each other. They were equal in authority, business ventures, reputation, and more. This meant there was no way that the Hilton family had enough authority to force a neutral organization since the Maxwell family couldn't do so. Charlotte didn't keep the elders guessing on the method used, as she continued informing them about her intel report. After hearing her out, the elders realized that their massive team didn't touch only the Hilton's nerves but actually all of the families in the competition. All of them wrote a complaint letter to the organization, demanding that 10 bloodliners per family was too many and that was going to raise displeasure within the commoners, who needed to compete for 15 days just to secure 50 spots. The bastards didn't mention the Maxwell family at all, as the letter was simply using public outrage and unfair competition as their ammo to change the rules. The organization received 9 letters from 9 families, leaving only the Maxwells. After reading them, the organization complied with the wishes of the majority. Not because they were forced or moved to tears by their goodwill, but simply because this was what they wanted in the first place. To reduce the number given to the families in order to let the commoners get more spots in the final competition. After all, the majority of the commoners actually had a better affinity rating than some families' juniors, as just to enter the public camp, having a 50% plus affinity rating was a must. The families just fulfilled the organization's wish without offending the masses. Sadly, for the Maxwells, they were the only ones affected heavily by this change of rules. All of this was proposed and led by the Hilton family. They kept their scheme sealed shut until the day the elders left their posts at the same time, blindsiding them like this. Charlotte told them that the letters were sent to the organization the moment they reached the airport, making them receive the news from the organization instead of their subordinates. Though, they knew that even if they had knowledge of their scheme way earlier, they still wouldn't be able to stop it. 1 voice against 9 voices. Plus the organization wanted this to happen, thus there was no hope to avoid kicking 3 juniors from the team. Sigh, how are we supposed to kick those children from the team after we made them bleed for this competition? Robert leaned closer as he spoke, trying to minimize his voice from reaching the ears of the juniors. The elders soon did the same and started whispering between each other, trying to discuss their next move. Annoyed by their attempt to stop him from eavesdropping, Felix clicked his tongue and reseated himself. Olivia stopped peeking as well and put the seatbelt back on with a worried expression. She didn't want any of her cousins to be left behind, but after hearing what Charlotte said, she understood that nothing much could be done to avoid that. "Who do you think are going to get kicked?" She whispered her question in Felix's ears. "Probably those 3 losers at the back," Felix said casually, not mincing his harsh words one bit. Everyone in the jet heard him loud and clear, as no one was speaking. "Shoo!" Panicked, Olivia hastily put her hands on Felix's mouth, closing it shut from saying any more. She started to regret asking this thug, who never gave a crap about his distant relatives. Alas, it was too late, as those 3 cousins all gave them an unpleasant glare. Olivia almost teared up after seeing them glaring at her like that. It was the first time someone treated her like that. Indifferent by their reaction, Felix removed Olivia's hands from his mouth and said, "Don't mind those losers, tell me, which integration percentage are you on?" "I am on 70%. She answered, still sulking. "How about Noah and Kenny?" he asked. The last time I heard, Noah was on 85%. As for Kenny, he still needed one more integration to reach greater purity. She replied, find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click hashtag #S-scheme_49940685532490623 for visiting. Not bad, I might not even need to make a move during the battles. He smiled in a pleased manner. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. Honestly, Felix just wanted to chill during this period of the battles. Away from games and business. Thus, the stronger his team was, the more chances he would have to laze around. I want everyone's attention to me. Felix's thought process was stopped by Abraham's loud request. He refocused on the elders, who were gazing at them with a solemn look. I believe you heard enough to understand your situation. Abraham's eyes landed on those three juniors at the back as he continued speaking, so there is no need to sugarcoat it. Thomas, Ryan, Elise, you are out of the team. Before those three could even react to the news, Robert added, however, you could participate in the qualifiers with the rest and make it back to the team. He smiled, we believe in you. That's right. Olivia pumped a fist in the air and encouraged, we will be there watching all of your battles and rooting for you. Sarah, Johnson, and Kenny also said some encouraging words, trying to uplift the spirit of those three. Only Felix and Noah said nothing. One was an asshole, and the other was a healthy mute. Now, as you have heard, the Hilton bastards were the ones messing with us. Albert stepped forward with a nasty expression and said, I want you to F*King destroy their juniors when you meet them in the arena. Find up Tedovals on n/v/elbin.co/m. If you want to break their legs, go for it. If you want to disfigure their faces, go for it. Charlotte made a cutthroat gesture and said coldly, you don't have to care about the consequences. Just be as brutal as possible against them. But, don't kill them. No one messes up with the Maxwells and leave in one piece. Carter turned around as he said one last time, show them that even if they took 3 members of our team, we will still reign supreme in the battles. Understood? Yes, elders. Disinterested, Felix mouthed his response while yawning. 2 hours later. The jets landed at a privately owned small airport. The elders got out first and went straight to group with the rest of the seniors, informing them face to face about the content of the call they received from the organization. Obviously, the parents of those 3 juniors weren't pleased with all the elders' decision to remove their children instead of others. Though Abraham simply asked them if their children could beat anyone in the team except for Olivia, they will replace the loser. After hearing so, they never mentioned the matter anymore. They knew that their children never won a single fight against those 4 during the previous months. There was no need to embarrass themselves any further. All right, let's go to the hotel. Abraham was the first to enter one of the black cars, which were waiting to pick them up to Florida City. The rest soon did the same, filling up all the cars. After checking that no one was left behind, Abraham gave the order to move. The hotel was a bit far since it was built in the center of the city. Of course, the hotel belonged to the family. Heck, all of it was reserved for their residents. While the commoners were having difficulty finding a place to sleep in this crowded city due to the competition, the Maxwell family reserved an entire 4-star hotel for only 70 members or so. Money might not buy you happiness, but it sure wouldn't let you starve or struggle to find a roof over your head. Days went by quickly as the qualifiers competition already reached its last day. Although Felix never went to the stadium to spectate the battles, he watched from time to time its live stream. As he expected, nothing much changed from what he saw in his previous life. The venue that hosted the competition was a newly built stadium that had an extremely wide arena made with tough stones, able to resist the majority of abilities under the first stage of replacement. Those kinds of stadiums were built all around the US in just a year, just like the assessment centers and the public camps. They were built to give the bloodliners without an AP bracelet a venue to compete and train with their peers. After all, they couldn't remain in the public camps forever. New commoners still needed to be trained as well. Plus, the spectators were going to pay for tickets to watch them train and fight. This meant the stadiums were always going to bring profit for the government and the organization. When compared to other SG stadiums in the rest of the states, this one was the biggest of them all. This was the reason it was chosen to host the national team battles. The ESGO US branch knew that people would flood to watch those fights live, thus they had to choose the biggest one to ease some of their burdens. Thankfully, the qualifiers stretched for 15 days straight, making the people who came to watch get at least a slight chance to attend the stadium one time. On the other hand, the participants in the qualifiers were made from 50 public camps, each belonging to a state. Each camp sent 10 bloodliners, making a perfect team that represented their state. If this was all to it, the 3 juniors from the Maxwell family wouldn't have a chance to join the qualifiers. Fortunately, there were some participants from nouveau-rich families, companies' recruits, and such. Those bloodliners were acting more like an ad for the companies, wearing outfits with their logos and brand. Sadly, the 3 juniors had to join those random bloodliners and create a team made of 10 to be able to participate. This added at least 10 teams made of those ragtag bloodliners, pushing the total number of teams to 60. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #49959122501682556 for visiting. There were 2 reasons why the organization made the competition team-based instead of individuals. First, the planetary supremacy games were being played by teams made out of 10 members or above. This meant those competitions needed to be team-based as well, to evaluate the bloodliners' teamwork. The second reason, and also the most important, there was absolutely no way to have individuals battles with such a huge number of participants. They couldn't just throw them all in the arena and tell them to fight it out in free-for-all, or simply make them compete in 1 versus 1. The time, the resources, and the manpower needed to pull that off was already being used fully for the World Battles preparation. Hence, it was much better to split the bloodliners into teams. As for the format used during those past 14 days, it was a tournament-based team versus team battles. Since the number of teams was quite hefty, there were 5 tournaments played out one by one. And each tournament winner secures a spot in the final competition that was going to start 2 days from now. Obviously, the team which had the 3 juniors were one of the first ones to get eliminated. Their teamwork was absolutely garbage when compared to other teams coming from the public camps. Those bloodliners had enough time to get familiar with each other's bloodline abilities. Meanwhile, the ragtag teams were running around like headless chickens, scared shitless about getting killed by a stray ability. One should never forget that the competition was being held in real life, which meant abilities could actually take lives if one wasn't careful in using them or defending against them. There was absolutely no protection from being harmed by the abilities. The organization only made a rule that intentionally trying to kill a bloodliner would result in heavy punishment. They weren't worried about crippling others or getting heavily wounded, since they had healing potions and substances ready to be used. Although they said so and emphasized the punishment, some bloodliners still died. It was impossible to avoid having deaths when dealing with 600 bloodliners all fighting using deadly abilities. Those deaths turned off some of the spectators' hype to continue watching the battles live. They knew that it was going to be gory, bloody, and even might end up in having deaths, but still, knowing was one thing, and seeing with their own eyes was another. Those types of people were rare though, as the majority were already used to seeing players die in the SG for the past year. They saw it happen many times, they became numb to the notion of death in battles. Thankfully for the Maxwell family, those 3 juniors didn't die but merely were injured heavily. The elders used their own potions to heal them back in shape. They might have lost, but they did get some experience battling other juniors outside of their family. That's how the qualifiers ended. Some deaths, please spectators, and 5 teams each made of 10 bloodliners going to the next stage, joining the final competition with those business and political families. All right, that's enough for today. Robert clapped his hands twice, stopping the juniors from practicing. They were inside his UVR room, which was modified to resemble the same arena in the stadium. The elders allocated 3 hours each day during the past 2 weeks to practice together. They did so because of Felix, who never trained with them before. It was only natural to see his abilities and also let him see theirs in order to build a better synergy. Get some rest, tomorrow we are heading to the stadium. Robert informed them with a stern tone. The juniors nodded their heads in understanding and logged out one by one, exiting Robert's UVR room. After opening up his eyes, Felix immediately left the hotel hall, where they always grouped up, and went to the elevator. Noah followed after him as well. A few seconds later, the elevator door closed, leaving them both alone in it. Felix tapped on the 5th floor button, where the males' juniors' rooms were located. Can you lead the team in the first battles? Felix suddenly requested. Noah looked at him dead in the eyes and shook his head firmly. Felix sighed and didn't mention it anymore. He already requested him 3 times to take the captain title away from him, but Noah was hell-bent on rejecting him. Ting! Noah left the moment the elevator door opened up. Based on the fast movement of his legs, it was clear that he was running away from Felix. He got harassed multiple times by him to get the captainship, he got even bribed with potions. Still, he refused. If it was an order from the elders he wouldn't say no, but since it was from Felix, there was no way he would let himself get such a bothersome rule that required speaking. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Felix was standing before a mirror looking at his reflection. He was checking the uniform sports outfit that the elders gave the team to wear. It was a combination of a jacket and tight-fitting sweatpants. Both of them were black with red stripes on the shoulders and sides of the pants. Of course, the family brand logo was planted boldly on the right chest. The outfit was the same one he wore in his previous life. He liked it before, but now, not very much. As the red stripes were conflicting with the green color of his hair. Though, it's still better than the majority of the outfits he saw during the live stream of the qualifiers. Knock, knock. Coming! Felix yelled after hearing his room's door being knocked for the 3rd time. He splashed some water on his face and left the bathroom, heading towards the door. We are about to depart, Felix. Faster! Faster! Olivia kept on knocking with the side of her fist while yelling. I am coming, damn it! 30 minutes later. The family's cars entered the stadium through the parking lot. They had to if they wanted to avoid the sea of people standing before the stadium entrance, waiting to welcome the participants. After parking successfully, a staff member came to guide them personally into the arena, where the rest of the participants were gathering. The elders were walking in the front, followed by the grumpy Felix, who didn't manage to latch the captain title to anyone, and the rest of the team making a proper line. All of them were wearing the same outfit, except for the elders, as they wore business suits. Today was assigned for the gathering of the participants, explaining the rules of the competition, and most importantly meeting with VVIP individuals. Thus, the elders had to be at their best look. Whoa! Holy! The moment the juniors entered the field, Olivia and Sarah couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment. They were not awed by the humongous circular white arena, which covered approximately an area of 4,100 square meters. They already saw it before when they attended to cheer for their cousins. What awed them was the number of people standing on it, as at least 100 or so were all lining up properly, facing a red and blue wooden-built stage that was decorated with many U.S. flags, fluttering by the wind ceaselessly. On that stage stood about 10 men and women, all wearing formal outfits. The elders wanted to check if that man was on the stage or not, but the distance between them was too far to have a clear vision. Thus, they stopped bothering and continued following the guide, who was taking them to their assigned spot to line up like the rest of the teams. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #49981610128368661 for visiting. That's right, each line represented a team. After the Maxwell Team Edition, there were currently 15 teams all wearing a different colored outfit with different logos and brands. 5 teams, who won the qualifiers, and 10 teams were from the families. Though the numbers differ significantly between the two, as the winners of the qualifiers most of them had a full roster of 10 bloodliners. Meanwhile the family teams, some had 6 bloodliners like Felix's team, while some had a pitiful 3 or even 2 bloodliners. Yet, they were still lining up proudly like they were not missing 80% to make a complete team. Immediately after lining up, Abraham squinted his eyes at the stage, sizing up the 10 individuals on it. He wasn't shocked at all by the heavy weight of those people's authoritative ranks. He expected as much to arrive today. There was the governor of Florida State, the president of the ESGO U.S. branch, secretaries of state, and many more authoritative figures. Yet, they were still standing silently and patiently, clearly waiting. They were not waiting for all the teams to gather nor for the stadium to be filled with spectators, they were waiting for only one man. The most authoritative man in the entire USA, the president himself. He. Amused by their solemn expressions, Felix chuckled softly. He knew that they were waiting for nothing, as the president wasn't going to arrive today. He didn't know why so exactly, but in his previous life, the president showed up only tomorrow, on the day of the battles. There might be a slight chance that timeline changed and the president would show up today, but that was a long shot. As expected, after 10 minutes of meaningless waiting under the sun, the governor of the state announced on the podium microphone that he just received a call, informing him that the president wasn't going to make it due to a change in schedule. He hastily added after hearing grumbling noises and chatter, "Don't worry, he will be here tomorrow for the opening ceremonial." He made a swirling gesture with his finger and requested from the reporters, broadcasters, and live streamers to roll the camera in 2 minutes. Everyone already made it, as the Maxwell team was the last to arrive due to Felix's tardiness. The only reason they didn't start the gathering was because of the president. Too bad, he bailed on them. The governor soon retreated to the back and let the president of the ESGO U.S. branch, Mr. Jones, to take the lead. He was an old man with a few white hair strands still attached to his head. He had a kind elderly smile as he looked at the juniors beneath him. The moment he saw that the cameraman gave him the go signal, he greeted warmly, "Good morning, everyone." Not expecting a replay, he continued, "As you could see, we have 15 teams standing before us. Some coming from public camps and some from private camps." He paused. "As much as I want to keep all teams intact, I am afraid that wouldn't be possible." While those near Felix were freaking out about what he meant, Felix already knew what was about to be said next. Everything so far was going exactly the same as in his previous life. As he expected, the branch president continued his speech, informing them that the commoners' teams were going to be removed, leaving only the 10 families' teams. Ignoring the chaos that rose after, he quickly clarified that the commoners' teams were going to be merged with the families' teams to make them reach 10 members. For example, the Maxwell team needed 4 more to reach a full roster. Yet, their situation was actually one of the best, as some families had only 2 bloodliners, which meant they would need 8 bloodliners to complete them. This biased arrangement was what made those commoner juniors livid and feel wronged. Not only them but even the spectators, who were watching the stream live in their homes or those outside of the stadium. They could begrudgingly bat one eye at the fact their qualifiers champions were getting merged with those rich teams. However, to actually rather leave a family team that had only 2 lousy members while destroying a champion team that showcased their grit and blood in the qualifiers? They could never let such blatant favoritism to the rich bypass them. In their eyes, those 2 members or 3 members from the families should be the ones joining the commoners' team. Or were they too superior to do that? The cameraman's professional reflexes made the situation even worse, as he focused the camera on the faces of some juniors from those stuck-up families. And what was shown to the public were disdainful and contemptuous looks targeting those commoners' juniors. Some even were curling their lips in disgust. "You rich kers dare look down on me. Break into the stadium." Those looks and expressions set the commoners on fire, both the juniors and the spectators. The juniors in the arena got easily controlled by their public camps instructors. However, the same couldn't be said to the spectators right outside the stadium, who were watching the live stream from the large screen implanted on the stadium wall. Curses, insults, and cheering gadgets were all thrown at the entrance staff from the rioting crowd. Get the L-test VLS at .o/v/e/l/by.co. The security teams were starting to have difficulty containing the chaos, as the crowd kept pushing and batting the metal gate with their fists, threatening to break into the stadium. Soon a staff member relied on the news to the inside, using a radio. The news quickly reached the ears of Mr. Jones and the authoritative figures behind him. Their expression couldn't help but change for the worst, as the last thing they needed right now was for the people outside to storm the arena. Mr. Jones moved away from the podium, wanting to discuss solutions with the governor to appease the public. The moment the elders of those families with 2 or 3 bloodliners saw them react like that, they knew that whatever was about to be announced wouldn't please them one bit. As they assumed, the first sentence that came out of Mr. Jones's lips made them displeased, as he said, "There will be changes on the teams merging." Felix just kept watching all of this happen, feeling like déjà vu. Everything that happened in this tournament in his previous life was gradually coming back to his memory. Just like a spell was being cast, the raging public was all silenced, waiting to see how were those changes going to affect the commoner teams. Thankfully, they were exactly what they wanted. As Mr. Jones said that only family teams with 4 bloodliners plus would remain intact, as for the rest, they will all drop their ego and join the commoners' teams. Obviously, the news didn't please the families which failed to fulfill the requirement, but it is what it is. They couldn't sound their complaint while being streamed on national TV and make themselves public enemies. They didn't want to have everyone boycott their products or business services. After an hour or so, Felix's team welcomed 4 new additions to their ranks. 2 girls and 2 boys. Olivia's cheerfulness made it easier for those commoners to fit right in the team. When they were chosen to join the Maxwells, they were excited about being part of such a strong team but also anxious about being looked down upon by them. After all, the tale that the Maxwells actually had 9 juniors awakened was already widespread in the media. The elders would be fools to not brag about it. Thus, when the commoners were being cherry-picked by the top families' teams, which were the Maxwells, Hiltons, and Waltons, they were eager to be picked, especially in the ranks of Felix's team. Felix, being the captain of the team, chose those 4 bloodliners, who excelled a bit better in the qualifiers. His reason was to make his team as strong as possible, so he wouldn't need to make a move. Felix wasn't a retard to choose randoms or trash players just to appear cool and confident. He knew that in the final tournament, they would be just a drag to the team, forcing him to save the day more than he needed. After the teams rearranged themselves, the lines got reduced to 10 from the previous 15. 2 families and 3 commoners' teams' names were removed from the list. But now each team had a full roster. Just like the qualifiers, the battles will be played out team versus team in a tournament-based format. Mr. Jones pointed his finger at a whiteboard that had 10 empty numbered brackets and said, "As you can see, 4 teams will have to compete first in order to make a perfect 8 teams brackets tournament." Everyone understood what he meant, as the 10-bracket tournament wasn't balanced like 8 bracket or 16 brackets. This meant 2 teams needed to be eliminated first. Why didn't they make the final tournament a 16 teams bracket? Confused, Olivia tilted her head as she asked the elders. There is no point in prolonging this tournament by adding extras to fill numbers. Robert shook his head and clarified, the end game was to make the best team possible in the US to be sent as representative in the world competition. Just as Olivia tried to ask again, she was interrupted by Charlotte. "All right, no more questions. After they explain the rules, you will understand what he meant." Soon, everyone on the team refocused on Mr. Jones, who unveiled a crystal see-through ball, resembling a small fish tank. The ball had inside of it many small colorful balls. Mr. Jones went back to the podium and said, "The placement in brackets will be done by drawing numbers. All you have to do is pick a ball, show the number to the camera, then go write your name in the placement you picked." Mr. Jones paused to see if they understood him or not. After seeing that no one was planning to ask questions, he moved on. "The captain of each team will do the drawing. Starting off from left to the right." Since the Maxwells were the last to arrive, they were put at the far left. This meant Felix was the first captain who needed to draw a number. Indifferent to the looks he was getting and the cameras focusing on his face, Felix walked towards the stage with his hands in his jacket's pockets. The distance wasn't that far, so he arrived in a jiffy. The moment he stepped on the stage, he saw that everyone's eyes were on him. Click, click! Anyone with stage fright would have thrown up by the pressure of being looked at by those authoritative figures, tens of cameras flashing lights, not to mention the 100 or so down the stage. However, Felix merely gave a polite smile and went to shake hands with Mr. Jones, who warmly received him. After so, he went to the crystal bowl and picked one small ball randomly. He cracked it open and took a small paper that had a number drawn on it. Before seeing the number himself, he displayed it before all. "Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #5002700582055155150 for visiting." Based on the envious looks he received, he knew that he dodged a bullet. Number 4? He glanced at the number in the paper while walking toward the whiteboard. As expected, the bracket he picked wasn't one of the 4 brackets that needed to compete for an extra battle. Honestly, based on his luck in the previous game wheels, Felix believed that he would land on those 4 brackets. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The last thing he wanted was to fight another battle against those toddlers. After writing his family name in the bracket he picked, he returned to his place under the excited cheers of his teammates and the elders. Just like him, they also felt glad about his pick. Though, for a different reason. Soon, the next team in line sent their captain on the stage. He didn't appear as calm and collected as Felix, however, he still managed to pick a number and write his team's name on the whiteboard. Luckily for his team, they neither picked the 4 cursed brackets nor landed on the same side as Felix's team. Afterward, teams' captains kept going one by one and filling the empty whiteboard with names. Some were unlucky and some were lucky. As a show that the drawing wasn't rigged in any way or form, the Walton family, one of the strongest candidates to win the competition, actually landed on one of the cursed brackets. Of course, they could easily get out of it, especially after being placed against a commoner team. However, that wouldn't happen without exposing their abilities. That would give a slight edge over their rivals. On the other hand, the Hiltons landed on the other side of the board away from the Maxwells. The only way for them to meet was during the finals. For the elders, it didn't matter if they met at the quarterfinals or the finals, as long as they meet, they will wipe the floor clean with them. After a couple of hours, the gathering ended and everyone swiftly went home with their new teammates. They needed to try their best to understand and adapt to each other's abilities. That would take a lot of time. However, they only have half a day to make it happen, as tomorrow morning the battles would officially start. Mr. Jones explained that the battles would be only one round each. This meant each team had only one opportunity to win and climb up the brackets. You lose, you out. Now, all the teams were rushing to shape themselves up for tomorrow, Maxwell's included. Visit N0VL/BEIN. For the best novel reading experience. Good morning, America. A good-looking broadcaster smiled at the camera and said, "Behind me are standing 10 teams made of the best bloodliners in the entire states. However, only one team could be chosen to represent us against the world." He extended a finger, but first, let's hear what our president has to say on such a glorious day. True enough, the President of the USA was standing on the same stage as yesterday in front of a podium. Reporters were gathering around it, taking pictures of him and the authoritative figures behind him. Meanwhile, the teams were lining up properly below the stage with the elders and instructors just like yesterday. On the other hand, the stadium was packed to the brim with spectators akin to a Super Bowl match. Everyone was cheering and screaming at the top of their voices. Peep! Pep! However, they soon quieted down gradually after seeing the president hitting the microphone lightly with his finger, expressing his desire to speak. Good morning, my fellow Americans. The president smiled and said, "Today is going to be etched in our memory and history books for eternity. We should all be grateful to be a part of it." He looked at the camera and continued, "This tournament will hopefully give us the first USA Bloodliners team that would dominate the rest of the world, and also the civilizations outside of our solar system. Let's be real for a second." He paused. "We have been exposed to the universe for about a year or so, and based on what we have been seeing, we are lagging behind in everything." He began naming a few: resources, talents, reputation, power, and most importantly technology. Utterly bored, Felix kept yawning while listening to this long-ass speech for the second time now. He knew that the president would keep going on and on for about half an hour until their heads start to puff out smoke. But he could only whine inside while waiting until he finished. Just like he thought, the speech ended half an hour later only after the president started receiving signals to wrap it up. "Thank you for your time and God bless America." The president waved his hands in the air, responding to the loud cheers by the audience. He soon left the stage while being accompanied by his people. No one knows if he was going to watch the tournament in the VIP rooms, or he was leaving the stadium for other matters. Please give one last round of applause to the president, Mr. Jones said with a merry smile while clapping his hands. Everyone clapped their hands and whistled as a send-off. After a while, the excitement died down, returning the stadium to normal. Mr. Jones gestured with his hand to a staff member, who immediately spoke in his radio after seeing the signal. "Before we begin the battles, we first need to motivate those juniors into putting their very best in this competition." Mr. Jones smiled mysteriously and said, "That's why we have put a reward to the champion team." Elated, the juniors all had their eyes focused on 10 staff members carrying small black boxes on red pillows while climbing the stairs of the stage. After they took their positions next to Mr. Jones, he requested, "Open them up, please." "Whoa!" Shocked and excited, the majority of the juniors all exclaimed out loud at the sight of 10 AP bracelets, glittering with a silver L.U.S.Ter. This was the reaction of the juniors who were in contact with the AP bracelet most of the time, don't even mention the commoners, who never saw it outside of screens before. The stadium rumbled, as the spectators all had eyes glowing with greed and envy like those bracelets were elixirs of immortality. After seeing such an intense reaction by the crowd, Mr. Jones quickly ordered the staff to close the boxes off and take them away. God knows if everyone will start jumping from the seatings, storming the arena to steal them. Teasing those commoners who would probably not touch the AP bracelet until 10 years or so was a quite stupid move. Let the battles begin. In an attempt to change the situation for the better, Mr. Jones rashly started the tournament. The juniors followed their elders and instructors outside of the arena, going to their own team resting area. Soon, the staff members came and took down the wooden stage, cleaning the arena from any obstacles. 15 minutes later. Felix was currently sitting on a bench, watching two teams, each standing at the far end of the arena. His memories were quite fuzzy on the Bloodliners' names in this tournament, except for one, who left a long-lasting impression in his previous life. The rest were absolutely strangers in his eyes. Though, he still remembered which teams won and lost, and who made it to the finals. Just like he remembered, the first teams to fight were the Waltons versus Alabama team. The tournament placement on this one remained the same even in this timeline. As for the rest, they were completely different. The juniors standing in the arena, wearing white and blue uniform outfits, were the Alabama team. They won the third qualifiers tournament while losing 2 members in the process. One was badly hurt, not physically but mentally by an ability, forcing him into an indefinite coma, while the other straight out died. This left 2 empty spots, which were given to a family that only had 2 bloodliners. Meanwhile, the Walton team was standing at the opposite side, wearing an outfit mixed with medium blue and yellow. The same colors Walmart stores were known for. That's right, the famously Walmart chain belonged to them. They were one of the richest families in the world. Their wealth far surpassing both the Maxwells and the Hiltons combined. Though, having a good affinity and awakening had nothing to do with wealth. Them having only 6 bloodliners further highlighted this point. Felix, who do you think will win? Olivia sat next to Felix and said, I watched the Alabama team before, and their captain element is the same as yours. Find out by yourself. They are about to start. He replied while staring at the host of this tournament, leaving the arena after giving an introduction about the 2 teams. Olivia stopped bothering him after seeing so as well. Captain Oliver, are we going to use synergy A or B? A teenager with a mohawk haircut asked a red-bearded man, appearing to be in his middle 20s. Let's go for B. Oliver smiled confidently at Michael, the vice-captain, and said, we will save the best for the best. You heard him. Michael clapped his hands twice and said, get in your positions, and don't you dare screw it up. We need to win under 2 minutes and show our dominance. Yes, vice-captain. After shouting their response, everyone spread out in the arena, standing apart from each other and circling the captain and the vice-captain of the Walton family. The Alabama team also stood in a unique formation, 4 were in front, 2 in the middle, and 4 at the back. After seeing that the countdown on the screen was about to hit 0, the host shouted through his microphone, battle. The moment the go signal was given, Oliver clapped his hand once, and a small wind whirl was manifested under his feet, lifting him up 20 meters mid-air. He appeared like he was standing on an active tornado. On the other hand, Michael pointed his finger at the back of Oliver. Suddenly, a gray thin wire manifested from the tip of his finger and linked itself with Oliver's leather belt that he was wearing on his waist. The wire was thin to the point it was almost invisible. Next, the rest of the team all used whatever supportive abilities they had to buff Oliver. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #synergies _500705514202139 for visiting. One provided him with a transparent shield, protecting his body from projectiles, while another made his head glow in red color, enforcing his mind against mental-type abilities. There were a total of 3 buffs on him. Those without supportive abilities took a defensive stance and protected the buffers. The entire formation creation didn't take even 2 seconds before Oliver was turned into a one-man army. The Alabama team was a bit shocked by the strategy used by their opponents. However, they were still confident that their formation was better, as it relied on a full team moving as one, instead of just one attacker and others supporting. Unfortunately, that notion was completely uprooted from their minds after Oliver rushed into the middle of their ranks while still mid-air, and started creating the same mini tornadoes under the feet of their buffers. Ack! 2 bloodliners, who were too close to the edge of the arena, were instantly lifted mid-air, just to have their bodies propelled outside of the arena by 2 wind blasts. Thud! Thud! Their bodies smashed into one of the team's resting areas, breaking the bench into halves. One of them laid out cold without moving an inch, while the other managed to let out a groan before passing out as well. Tom! Mickey! Worried, Luke, the captain of the Alabama team, shouted while looking at the unmoving bodies of his teammates. "No one taught you to never lose focus in the middle of a battle?" Oliver's sarcastic voice invaded the ears of Luke, setting him up in raging fury. However, being furious wouldn't magically help him reach Oliver, who was 20 meters above them. He was a poison elementalist like Felix, but his abilities were centered around melee form battles. Just like the 3 other melee form bloodliners in his team, they were absolutely hopeless in front of Oliver's ultra-ranged battle style. However, their abilities might be useless against Oliver. The same couldn't be said against the rest of the Walton team. Luke quickly laid down his orders for the Rangers in his team to focus on Oliver while they tried to take out his teammates. He knew that based on the many buffs on Oliver, his Ranger teammates' attacks weren't going to harm him now. However, as long as they hold him back, he was confident in taking care of the Walton supports. The arena was quite large, almost the half size of an average football field. Thus they had to sprint for a while to reach the end of it, where the Walton team members were still standing in formation. Oliver was left behind, being attacked by a salvo of elemental abilities. He had to dodge some of them, as his shields weren't going to sustain him throughout the entire barrage. Even when the situation was clearly getting deteriorated, Oliver still had a confident smile on his face, like everything was within his plans. The moment Luke and the other 3 made it to the end of the arena, they split up, each went for a specific target. The captain kept on going forward, aiming at Michael, who was standing in the middle of the formation all by himself. Luke opened his mouth, exposing 2 long deadly fangs while dashing towards Michael, wanting to bite him. He knew that one bite was all it takes to seal the deal. However, instead of seeing a frightened expression on his opponent, he only saw him give a C.O.C.KY smirk while bending his stretched finger. Whoosh! Simultaneously, the sound of the wind could be heard behind Luke, akin to something heavy being dragged. Disturbed by the sudden sound, he turned his head, and what came in his sight made him tremble all over. He wasn't the only one shocked by the sight, as his teammates in the arena all stopped whatever they were doing and kept gazing slack-jawed at Oliver's body folded into 2 while being pulled by his waist rapidly towards Michael and Luke. No one understood what was happening besides Felix and the Walton team's members, who all had a victorious smile. "Welcome back, Captain." Michael laughed while asking Oliver, who stopped exactly above Luke, "Getting used to it yet?" "Just slightly." Oliver's green sick face said otherwise. Michael chuckled and snapped his finger twice, sending a signal to his teammates. Immediately after seeing it, they dropped acting defensively and surrounded the 4 members of the Alabama team, waiting for orders to get rid of them. The battle instantly turned into 4 against 10. With Oliver's current strength, the odds of those 4 retreating to regroup with their teammates were hopeless. "Attack!" Michael was the first to make a move, as he pointed all of his fingers towards Luke, sending a gray wire for each finger. Luke attempted to evade getting caught by them. Sadly, he was too near to make it happen. His arms, legs, and lastly his neck were all tied up by those thin wires. Michael tightened up his fingers slightly while threatening, "Surrender or your neck will be sliced." Unbothered by the blood dripping from his neck and limbs, Luke kept gazing at his teammates trying their best to survive the onslaught of the Waltons, especially from Oliver. If it wasn't for him, they might have managed to regroup with their rangers, who were rushing towards them. Unfortunately, Oliver was pulled back just to increase their offensive power, to get rid of them in one full sweep. Arg! Arg! Disheartened by the pained sounds of his teammates, Luke closed his eyes while murmuring softly, "We surrender." Louder! Michael yelled while tightening the wires even further. However, after seeing that Luke was having difficulty breathing, he relaxed his fingers, withdrawing his wires once and for all. "We, cough, surrender." Desperate, Luke shouted with a bit of difficulty. His hands were clutching his neck that was dripping with blood. Yet, he had a relieved expression after seeing that the Waltons kept to their words and stopped attacking his teammates. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. If those two extras from the families were the ones being beaten up, he wouldn't even budge. Unfortunately, those two were left behind as they were rangers. His friends who he spent almost a year with were the ones being caught. He didn't want them to die like the last one in the qualifiers. Good fight. Oliver dropped from the air, landing next to Luke. He patted his shoulder with a polite smile and went to group up with his teammates. "Give your loudest applause to your winners, the Waltons." The host climbed into the arena while extending his hand to the Walton team, who were lining up horizontally and bowing to the spectators and the camera. The spectators weren't shy in their cheers, even though the team that lost was part of the commoners. Annoyed by the deafening noises, Felix rubbed his ear while standing up. He looked at Olivia, who was clapping her hands innocently, and sighed. "Little Ollie, stay behind me during our first battle, all right?" He warned her, "Fighting for real is not the same as in the Elders' UVR rooms. So stick by me until you get used to it." Though Felix said so, he knew that Olivia would probably never get used to the feeling of seeing others get harmed or harming them by herself. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/by.com. He didn't doubt for a second that she would actually go heal up their opponents if one of them was in critical condition. She was already doing so during the practice fights, and the elders were tired of scolding her for it. "Dawn, be silly! How can the healer stay in one place?" She gave him a thumbs up with a confident grin and said, "Don't worry, I know what I am doing." "I doubt it." He smiled wryly and said to the rest of his team, "Prepare yourselves, we are going next in 10 minutes. Felix didn't need to remind them, as they were already doing their parts to relax their nerves over the upcoming battle. Sarah and Johnson were meditating, taking deep breaths in and out, while Noah was merely staring at the sky absent-mindedly. Meanwhile, the four commoners, Lexi, Isabella, Dale, and finally Nathan, were conversing with Kenny with such unexpected familiarity that they could be confused for lost friends. Heck, Kenny had only 12 hours to get into their clique and make them feel comfortable beside him. The way he spoke, moved, and acted didn't have a single ounce of pride and superiority of being heir to a business empire. No wonder all cousins called him the 100-faced Kenny. He could make those around him unwittingly drop their guard by changing his personality to complement theirs. After seeing that no one was nervous, not even Olivia, Felix nodded his head in satisfaction. He didn't want to be the captain since he needed to be responsible for them, especially when the elders and instructors weren't allowed to be near the resting area. But it seemed like everyone was managing themselves properly without getting him worked up. After 10 minutes, the arena was cleaned yet again. Though, that long duration between battles wasn't for exactly so, but for TV ads. There was no way in hell the organization would let such a freebie go by them. The tournament was being spectated live by 100 million viewers at the least. The stream wasn't broadcasted only in America but actually worldwide. The majority of countries were tuning in to watch. After all, when compared to the rest of the national team battles, which were happening in most countries, the USA tournament, the Chinese tournament, and finally the European tournaments, were the popular ones. Right now, the only national tournaments left were the USA and some small countries. As for the rest, they already finished 15 days earlier and picked the teams they were going to send to represent them. This meant Felix's upcoming battle was actually having more viewership than his 2 games combined in the SG. This was one of the reasons Felix thought that his teammates might get nervous in the battle and force his hand to make unnecessary moves. Thankfully, they seemed unbothered. "Will the 2 teams please step up in the arena?" the host requested while pointing his microphone at the Maxwells and Lauders resting area. "Let's go." Indifferent, Felix walked towards the arena first while following behind him were the expressionless Noah, the cheerful Olivia, the hundred-faced Kenny, and the rest. Cheers mixed with some boos rained on them as well as on the other team, who was walking on the opposite side of the arena. While the Maxwells were wearing black and red outfits, the Lauders were wearing a white sports outfit stripped with black lines all over it. Yet, unlike the Maxwells, who weren't using any brand besides their families, the Lauders had numerous brands planted on their outfits. All of them were cosmetic brands that belonged to the family. The Lauder family were known internationally for their cosmetic products, which were sold in approximately 150 countries and territories under brand names including Estée Lauder, Aramis, Cerise, Origins, Tommy La Mer, Bobbi Brown, and many more. Their wealth was in the tens of billions, almost surpassing the Maxwells. However, when it came to the Bloodliners, they only had a pitiful 4 awakened juniors. Thankfully, they barely met the requirement to keep their team's name instead of merging with a commoner team like the other 3 families. After the host made an introduction to both families' businesses and praising them to the sky, he requested from both teams to get into their battle formation. Formation A. Spread out. An elegant tall blonde girl clapped her hand once, and the juniors, who were near her, all went to their positions without letting out a single sound. 5 juniors stood next to each other at the front line, while the other 4 made a square formation around their captain, putting her in the center. It seemed like their captain was either a support or a ranger to have that many defensive measures made for her. Simultaneously, the Maxwells spread out in a basic known formation. Noah, Nathan, and Dale were standing at the front, while Olivia, Lexi, and Felix were right behind them. Lexi and Olivia were the only supportive Bloodliners on the team. Olivia was more like a healer while Lexi acted like a buffer, giving out shields, protections, haste buffs, and such. Though, she had only one ability. The reason Felix was standing with them was to act as their bodyguard. As long as he was with them, they would not lose a single hair strand. On the other hand, Sarah and Isabella were situated only a couple of meters behind Felix. They were the only elemental rangers in the team besides Felix. This left Johnson and Kenny. Both of them were actually standing away from the team, each in a different direction. Based on the elements they had, they were obviously going to act as assassins, aiming at the backlands of the Lauders. The moment Amelia, the captain of the Lauder family, saw those 2's positions, her expression hardened. She knew that having one assassin was already bliss for any team, don't even mention 2. What's even worse was the fact she had absolutely no ability to counter their sneak attacks, or even spot them beforehand. Her team also lacked such a means. "Barry, switch your position and stand behind us." Amelia ordered one of the 5 frontliners in a calm manner. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #SChildren _50028791434633613 for visiting. All right. Barry immediately left his spot and stood 1 meter behind the square formation, protecting their back. "Whatever you do, stop those 2 assassins from reaching me." She gave him a cold glance, sending chills down his spine. He knew that Amelia does not tolerate 2 things: not abiding by her orders, or failing them. Thus, if he wanted to avoid getting punished by her, he needed to bring his A game. They might be cousins, but their family's hierarchy wasn't the same as the Maxwells'. In the Lauders, a successful junior could order seniors of the family who were beneath him in achievement and merits. And Amelia was the top dog in the family, succeeding in both business and integration. Hence, her orders in the team were more like unquestionable laws. Unlike Amelia's serious expression, Felix was standing between Olivia and Lexi with his hands in his jacket's pockets, totally disinterested in reading too much in his opponent's formation. "Just like we practiced." Felix yawned as he said, "I will back you up whenever you land in trouble, so don't worry about getting heavily wounded or dying. So just go all out." Everyone nodded their heads at his proclamation. From what they saw in their daily practice, Felix was without a doubt one of the strongest bloodliners in the competition. Thus, they knew he wasn't talking air, but meant every word. "You can start planting, little Ollie." Felix looked at the countdown on the large screen and saw that only 20 seconds were left before the host gave them the go signal. "Okay." The moment Olivia received his permission, she went to Noah and the other 2 frontliners. After seeing her behind their backs, they all crouched in front of her. A bit saddened, Olivia snapped 3 petals from her yellow lily flower and put them on top of their heads. She then placed both of her hands on top of Noah's scalp and used her passive ability called Lily's Children. Promptly, green particles started to emit from her palms into the petal, making it glow with a greenish light. The yellow petal started to feed on her elemental energy and transform from a petal into the same version of Olivia's lily flower. They were identical in everything except for the size, as the one on top of Noah's head was noticeably smaller. After finishing with Noah, she repeated the same sequence with the other 2. Seconds later, the 3 boys all stood up with a newly grown yellow flower on top of their heads. Noah was expressionless as always, not affected in the slightest by his new embarrassing look. However, the same couldn't be said about the other 2, as their cheeks and ears were about to emit smoke from shame. They truly began to regret being chosen in this team. Ha 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 ha. Well, their reaction was totally understandable, as everyone was either laughing their asses off at them or trying their best to hold it. The host, the viewers, their opponents, even Felix, and the rest of the team. No one was taking them seriously except for Olivia, who had her hands placed on her H.I.P.S. with a gratified smile. "I will heal you the moment you get scratched." Olivia pumped her fist encouragement as she said with a cute smile, "Fighting. Let the battle begin." The host wiped his red eyes while announcing out loud, trying to save those boys from this public embarrassment. The moment Felix heard the announcement, he moved forward and pulled Olivia by her collar back to his side. He didn't want to risk having her running around the arena. "Let me go. You can't treat the healer like this." Aggrieved and miffed, Olivia kept flailing her hands and arms, struggling to escape his grasp. Sadly, her attempts were futile against his strength. Thus, she could only sulk while watching the rest of her team beginning to make a move. Starting off with Johnson and Kenny, who both disappeared from everyone's sight after the battle began. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click #thelauderteam _50053235955790978 for visiting. Kenny relied on his active ability Stealth, while Johnson breathed out gray fog from his mouth ceaselessly, filling up the entire area around him. The fog didn't remain stationary or follow Johnson everywhere he went like Felix's aura. Instead, it kept spreading by itself in all directions. Inside the fog, Johnson's passive elemental camouflage activated automatically. This passive was common in the majority of bloodlines, as it allowed the user to remain completely undetected by any kind of vision by fusing the elemental energy released with his aura. Fire elementalists, water elementalist, and the rest all had a high chance to unlock this passive. However, not everyone preferred having it, as to use it efficiently, elements like fog, which consume a pitiful amount of energy, were a must. This meant, in the hands of Johnson, this passive turned him into a deadly assassin inside his fog. Barry's expression turned unsightly at this sight. He had no idea how was he supposed to protect Amelia from those two while he had physical morphing abilities. However, Ching about it wasn't going to help him either. He quickly used the only active ability that he had. His legs were starting to morph into buffalo's ones, meanwhile, his forehead grew two long bent horns. After his transformation ended, he stuck right by Amelia while staring in the other direction with his vigilance raised to the peak. His transformation might have appeared amazing, but no one was actually paying attention to him, as everyone's eyes were captured by Noah's transformation. That's right! Noah's second ability that he unlocked in his greater purity was related to morphing types. This was quite understandable, as his cryogenic Yeti bloodline belonged to a beast that fights using mostly its body parts instead of its element. With an expressionless cold face, Noah's extended thin arms were slowly enlarging akin to being puffed out by air. His jacket sleeves ripped apart, exposing his morphed arms in the open. SSSSSSSS. The spectators drew a deep breath at the sight of his arms, which became massive to the point he could slap one of them to paste. Yet, what shocked them even more, was the thick white fur that encased them, leaving only his palms to appear human-like. Yet, Noah's transformation was far from over, as the main ingredient was still lacking. Noah's pulled back his behemoth right hand and activated his first ability, Ice Mace. Thud! This time Noah didn't use his energy to hold his heavy ice mace that weighed half a ton but actually lifted it with one hand and put it on his shoulder like he was carrying a baseball bat. A bit scared by the sight, the frontliners of the Lauders gulped audibly while swiftly activating all of their abilities. Though, the majority had only one, as they were still in lesser purity. Buff them up, Lexi. Felix ordered. Obedient, Lexi pointed her finger at those three and called softly, "Breeze of the Wild." Abruptly, Noah's feet started glimmering with white particles as well as the other two. This enhanced their speed indirectly by making their body weight lighter. For Noah, who was carrying that gigantic mace, this ability was heaven sent. Make sure to not kill anyone, Noah. Felix smiled and said lastly, "Have fun." Boom! Noah brought the mace down to the ground and charged forward while dragging it behind him. His eyes were gazing at the Lauders without a single hint of mercy. Without a doubt, Noah was planning to go all out and bash the shit out of them, not caring if they survived his assault or not. Felix dragged the sulky Olivia and chased after Noah. Not too fast, and not too slow. The rest of the team moved with him as one, trying not to break the formation. There was no way Felix would let Noah go that deep without staying behind him. After seeing that the Maxwells were going on offense, Amelia started laying down her orders in a composed manner. Frontliners, hold your positions. Rangers, prepare your abilities. Buffers, use your offensives buffs on me. Just like a well-maintained machine, her teammates did exactly as she told them. The Elemental Rangers each held an active ability in their hands. Fireballs, wind blades, one even had a bolt of lightning sizzling in his hand. Meanwhile, the Buffers used all they had on Amelia, utterly ignoring the frontliners. 10, 9, 8, Amelia held a bow made of wood while pulling its string to the limit, aiming at Noah. She kept counting backward with one eye closed shut and the other narrowed, putting all of her focus on her target. 3, 2, 1, now. Phew! Whoosh! Whoosh! She released the string, shooting a green arrow made of energy. The entire bow was an active ability. After hearing her order, the rest of the Rangers all hurled whatever was in their hands as well. Boom! In a perfectly timed manner, Noah swung the mace in front of him, destroying most of the elemental salvo. Unlike the elemental Rangers' attacks, which were quite slow, the arrow released by Amelia was too fast to be dodged or defended against. Luckily, the arrow landed on his morphed arm, doing absolutely no damage to him. The yeet fur was too thick to be penetrated that easily. Regardless, Amelia and her teammates didn't just release one salvo and called it a quit. In fact, they increased their shooting speed, barraging Noah by more than he could take. In the end, he was forced to stop advancing and focus only on defending. The Rangers were pretty smug about toning down some of Noah's arrogance. After all, he was literally trying to reach them without getting any assistance from his teammates. But Amelia's expression kept getting graver after each salvo they send. Noah was almost completely protected by the mace and his massive furry arms. Besides some lucky fireballs, which exploded behind his back, scorching him up a bit, the rest of the attacks were simply wasting their limited energy for no purpose. Hold! She raised her hand and changed their strategy by ordering frontliners collapse on him. Immediately, the frontliners all left their position and charged towards Noah, each holding either a weapon or having a body part morphed into a beastral part. There was still 15 to 20 meters between them. Olivia, heal him up. Felix ordered in a relaxed manner. Eager to be helpful, Olivia folded her hands, activating her first active ability, Lily's Blessing, on herself. New N0VEL chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/co/M. In a split second, the lily flower on her head started glowing akin to a green lamp. At the same time, all of the 3 flowers on Noah's head and the rest of the frontliners began glowing as well. Nathan and Dale felt absolutely nothing but pure embarrassment. However, in Noah's case, he felt a refreshing breeze caressing his scorched back. He wasn't able to turn around and see what was happening to his back, but the spectators, who were laughing at Olivia's ability before, were shocked at the inhuman speed his back was recovering to its original state. No wonder Olivia's passive was called Lily's Children. The lily flower on top of Olivia's head acted as a mother, who feeds her children the same thing she was fed to. In other words, any ability used by Olivia would resonate with anyone who was affected by her passive. Her Dundalia Lily bloodline might be only a rare rank, but she sure unlocked an amazing passive that was hard to find even in epic rank bloodlines. That's enough, Ollie. Felix said. Just a little more, his back is still red. Stubborn, Olivia refused to listen to Felix, as she kept her ability active until Noah's skin appeared paler than he had it before. Much better. Finally satisfied, Olivia unlocked her folded hands, deactivating her ability. Her pure delightful smile was enough to melt the hearts of the spectators. However, Felix only felt annoyance at seeing her behave like this. Those extra unnecessary seconds costed her at least 15% of her energy. After all, her ability was being active not only on Noah alone but also on herself and those two. She was being way too wasteful in her energy management, and Felix was tired of chiding her in their practice runs to consume as little as possible. Frontliners, help him out. Felix ordered the moment he saw that Noah was being surrounded by the Lotters. Kill! Eager to vent their embarrassment, Nathan and Dale let out war cries as they charged towards the messy fight. It seemed like Noah was having a tough time against those 4 frontliners. Even though he knew when to strike with his mace and when to use his thick fur as a shield against their weapon, his heavy mace was making him leave way too many openings each time he went on offense. Smash! Crack! The arena's floor immediately cracked after Noah brought down the ice mace from above, totally missing the head of his target. His large movement caused him to have his back wide open to the 2 bloodliners, who were behind him. Slice. Clash. Unable to react in time, a sword attack managed to slice Noah's back, leaving a long bloody gush. Though, the other attack was successfully blocked by Nathan's gray metallic shield. Skin hardening. Furious at failing to block that sword attack, Dale shouted while jumping on the sword holder, bashing him with his bare bronze fists. Bam! Bam! Arg! His fists might be bare, but they sure deal a lot of harm, as the 2 punches he threw managed to break that bloodliner's jaw as well as his frontal teeth. Now, the fight turned into Noah against 2, while Nathan and Dale were holding the other 2. Even with a long bloody wound in his back, Noah neither cried nor groaned, he just lifted his heavy mace and continued battling the other 2 even fiercer than before. This wasn't due to his pain tolerance or bravery, but the doing of his passive ability, Blood Rush. The more wounds he sustained, the faster and stronger his attacks get. He truly started to resemble a glacial barbarian even though he appeared more like an ice prince. Well, that's all for this part, Trekkers. See you all in the next video.